Starting. Oh, and we are live. So, greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the first live stream on my live streaming channel. The topic today is going to be Solo, a Star Wars story, otherwise known as Solo, or Unnecessary Disney Star Wars Prequel number 2. So, today I have a special guest called Smudboy. You may have seen his stuff, or you may not have. He's been recently making a lot of Star Wars-based content, and Anthem content, if I am correct. Smudboy, do you want to introduce yourself and explain your channel?
Yes, hello, my liege. We are here talking about all sorts of things science fiction related, specifically about Star Wars. I've been doing that the past few weeks, as well as, of course, Anthem. And yeah, I think it's one of those wonderful areas of fiction that we all sort of put our imaginary hats on and think of the world as it might be. And when you have Star Wars, you have this gigantic franchise that's the most popular franchise, I think, in movie history. And it's just been going through so many iterations and so many changes that we have to look at the details and see why it's still around, or if it will be around, because the movie we're looking at today is going to be a little different than the other ones, that's for sure. So let's go into that.
Indeed. Just for anyone watching, I can recommend Smudboy's videos on Star Wars, but I can also recommend his very famous, and I think really your big break, if I'm correct, your Mass Effect series on the ending of Mass Effect 3. I can definitely recommend that to anyone who's watching.
That's sort of as a result of the channel. The channel came about because of Mass Effect 2 and the arguments I was having on forums with people. And naturally, if I'm going to do a problem with the second part of a trilogy, I may as well address the problems of the third part. And that's where, not because I don't think it was popular because of me, I think it was popular because of how bad the parts of the story were, and a lot of fans are aware of that. Again, there's always fans who are going to love something no matter how bad something is, and that's totally fine. You could enjoy your stick in the mud as much as you want. You know, it's beautiful brown, watery, earthy colors, and the branch. It's just, you know, fantastic fun times for everyone. But for everyone else who wants to take a step back and go, hey, you're just playing in the dirt there, aren't you? We have to actually think about what's going on. And it wasn't so much me pointing out the obvious, it was everyone else realizing, yeah, there's something wrong with this story, and we needed an outlet to express ourselves. And YouTube, I think, gets everyone into the yard to scream and shout, and we're just riding that wave, and that's how it goes, really.
I think you're being slightly modest, to be fair, but yeah, I have to agree to some extent, but I wouldn't play down your contribution to the analysis of that horrendous ending. But anyhow, I think we should probably get off that topic, because that is an interesting thing to talk about in itself. And
I think your military mind would definitely look at the tactics, the ground, the air, everything in that game, and see the various superficial, if not, obviously most sort of media does not depict military tactics as very accurate, and it's purely for sensational reasons. I get that, but if you're going to do something with weapons that travel near light speeds and all these other things, you really have to be very careful with your science fiction and your science and how you write that and how you depict that. So I think even if you ever wanted to, and there's plenty of opportunities in those stories, visually written, books, comics, to see just how poorly thought out ship design, weapon design is. You could spend a few years on just the designers, what they came up with, and what the producers produced.
And unfortunately, I do not have the time. So, okay, let's. So some people will know that before watching Solo: A Star Wars Story and then taking forever to watch it, I did make some predictions, and they mostly kind of came true. I mean, but one thing I predict. What did you predict, Smudboy? When you saw the reviews coming in, did you expect the reviews to be through the roof? Did you expect them to be terrible? And what were you expecting of the film?
I was thinking more or less because we are aware of the production value, like it's a high production value, but because of what happened during the production, they had so many reshoots. They had to hire an acting coach. They had to get new directors. You know, that's just a horrible setup for content as well as what you've done with all that money. And then you realize how much money they spent on marketing. So they're like, oh, they really want this thing to do well. They've done all this work, so it must be better. They must have fixed something, and we don't know exactly whose version of the script and whose version of the production came out. And you know, is it more Ron Howard? Is it more by committee? Is Kathleen Kennedy calling the shots in certain scenes? So I was going in like, okay, this could be anything. This could be great. This could be garbage. This could be middle of the road. I had no idea what to expect, aside from there was a lot of problems. Apparently they fixed the problems and we're not sure what the result is. And there was that whole blog post about how they showed it to young mothers and they didn't like it so much. I'm thinking, well, that's not a big deal. Young mothers don't really care about science fiction stories and all that jazz. So it could have gone either way. And in most cases, I look at these big budget films as, okay, they couldn't have screwed it up that much. Like they couldn't have fallen off the mark that far. If we have The Last Jedi to be as a baseline. So, you know, you start from ground zero and you go, okay, it has to get better. And arguably, I would say it did. Not by much, but, you know, I'd rather watch this than The Force Awakens. I'd rather watch this than definitely The Last Jedi. And I haven't seen the previous movie before it. I've not seen Rogue One, so I can't say in comparison to the cinematography and what have you, because all these big shows are all just big cinematography budget busters. They just go crazy with their cinematics and their CGI. So I can't say if that's better, but those two stories are outside of the typical Star Wars trilogy format. So they're side stories, and you know, there's more rumors of the Obi-Wan movie coming out or being developed. So you're always interested to see that world you like, that universe you like. What are they going to do next? So for Solo, it was like, geez, you know, this could go either way.
Yeah, agreed. I read so many professional articles to make 2 videos on the subject. So I wasn't surprised that it was kind of mediocre, which we'll get into, but I was actually rather surprised that the critics weren't giving it all the praise which they gave The Last Jedi, which is, of course, a worse film. So that was enlightening, I think. But yeah, it's a rather interesting state of affairs, this film. So I think more or less in the order of what the critics talked about, I sort of made a collection of notes, which I'll ask I'll give my opinion and my thoughts and analysis, and then ask for yours. So, going about the main character of Solo, it's rather strange that, despite the fact that it's supposed to be an origin story, he wasn't really a self-made individual, or rather self-defined. It seemed like throughout the entirety of the film, everything was being given to him or provided to him. So whether it was his signature gun, which was just a random gun thrown to him, he didn't make it, he didn't find it from killing a particularly horrendous villain, etc. It was just really strange to watch. And I actually was a bit surprised because a lot of the critics were saying, "Oh, there's enough fan service in here to please anyone," and it's just like, oh, Solo's signature gun. Oh, he just was given it by someone. Ah, that lovely ammo vest. I mean, which Chewbacca wears. Ah, right. He just picks it off the floor. I think Mauler pointed out that one rather astutely. Just really bizarre. What did you think of the execution of Solo's character?
The execution is always hard to say. I mean, you're walking into this being a giant fan service to people who know lore, and there's really obscure references when you actually listen and pay attention. So when you're talking about the character of Solo, it's like, okay, they got to get some basics done right so that if there is another movie, you have just enough to say, okay, this can work at the end, that his character has met an arc to match up with A New Hope. Yet you could say, okay, there could be options for him to grow as well, to be even more jaded or less jaded or whatever. So to give him this sort of street rat backstory, first love sort of thing is like, okay, great. But it's how they did it. That was the main problem. And there were a lot of things in his character that just, they had no basis. It was like, oh, he's just really good at cards. He's just really good at driving. He's just really good at piloting. And you're like, how? And there's no explanation. Like, they could have given amazing stories. Like, imagine he had a teacher that taught him how to pilot, and he was constantly the stick man. Like, he was constantly getting into bad events or bad scenarios where he was so young and inexperienced that all he could do was drive the car. And he just kept doing that and doing that and doing that. And he was like, hey, now I can get away. Now I'm really good at running away or whatever. Then you'd say, hey, there's he's a scoundrel, but he's not a bad guy. He's just running away. He's not actually committing the crimes. So you could sort of identify with him and still care about him without seeing him as like a murdering psychopath who goes around and blows people away in a starship. But instead, we got this sort of rags to almost riches storyline, and they never really showed an arc where he's forced to make a choice to choose between his life of this or his love of that. It was kind of just, here's a really convoluted series of events matching up to a climax, which is even more convoluted. And that's not the best way to characterize someone or to give them character, through all these events that you can't wrap your head around. So I would say the characterization was minimal to poor. It was not effective, and everything along the way was just a series of lore drops for the sake of having them. Like, yeah, here's his blaster, and there's Chewie, then blah blah blah. So it never really connected emotionally. Like, the blaster, I don't know why the blaster needed to be in there, or needed to have a dramatic value, or like it could just be a blaster, which it was. But like, well, then why even bother? Like, what's the point? So there were things they did for no point, for no reason. Like, his last name was just I don't even know what the heck the point of having a last name in there was all about. I mean, it's
Imperial bureaucracy, I suppose. It just makes the paperwork easier.
Yeah, are you going to call your son Solo, even though it was some name some random dude gave you? Are you going to name your wife Solo just because that's the naming convention when you get married?
Of course.
Like Princess Leia Solo. Come on, it's kind of stupid. So,
to be fair, it does sound fun. It does sound cool, but yes.
Yeah, it sounds cool, but it should have been given in a cool way. Like, hey, you're Solo. You're always on yourself. Like, if he's like the stick man, if he is by himself waiting for cool stuff to happen, and then it's time for him to be Solo or be the stick man, then bam, then we've got this really cool scene of him being Solo. And everyone would call him that. It's like, hey, it's Solo. He's going to drive us away to freedom. Get away. It's like, yeah, but no.
Or actually, what if, I mean, since they decided they were going to throw him in the ground forces anyway, what if he just had a habit of going into combat or going on missions solo?
Exactly.
It could be something his comrades keep ruling him.
Exactly. And there you go. This is a way of fixing problems before you go to print or before you even hit the keyboard. You know, it's like, wow, what a great, simple idea. Then how do you do that? Again, we could do the same thing with what they actually did in the story, where the Imperial agent's like, okay, you're Solo, you don't have a background. He gets pissed off at that because I have a background. I'm just not going to tell you. It's like, yeah, whatever, Solo, you're by yourself. Then he takes that as resentment, and that motivates him to do things to prove he's not just some street rat. And he ends up getting the nickname Solo because he does things by himself because he's so headstrong and no one follows him into battle. And he ends up being this, ridiculously good soldier. So that would have worked. Yeah.
it also would have been great because then he would be defining himself. Because I always got the feeling he was kind of passive throughout the film, as if it's like, oh, some smugglers, better go with them. Oh dear, I'm being chased by goons in the beginning of the film. Quick, join the Imperials. That type of thing. It just seemed that he sort of flip-flopped or sort of floated with the breeze of the plot and just found himself in areas.
It's hard to say because the pacing wasn't exactly quick, but it wasn't slow either. Like things were happening rather quickly, but they weren't him being an active protagonist. It was more or less him going with the flow. So, hey, he just lost his girlfriend. Time to join the Empire. You know, it's like, oh, okay, sure, that could
French
work.
Foreign Legion kind of thing.
Yeah, I know. He's like, oh, I need money. All right, well, you got to go do something, get some money, so you can come back and get your girl. I get it, but then a time skip happens. You're like, wow. Well, you're not the Dread Pirate Roberts. You didn't find your fortune. You just sort of joined the military, and that was that. So,
not even
yeah,
successfully because he wanted flight school.
and he didn't get that. So it's like, what the hell were you doing there? Couldn't you like ask around, hey, could I join the military to be part of the Air Force or something? And there was no commentary. There was no dialogue saying, no, you can't. You have to join the troopers for a year or something. It's like, all right, like how do you get into flight school? How do you get into that team? There's no background story on the Empire of how that happens, which is bizarre because the Empire would want like, you're good at what? You're good at cooking? Okay, you're a line chef. Here we go.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, like why didn't the Empire have a meritocrat based system? Like they just take any grunt and say, okay, now I think you're going to be a soldier because we said so. It's like, why?
Well, I was just playing with these dice right here, and that's how we do things behind the scenes. But in all seriousness, though, he worked in a shipyard. He was on a shipyard planet. If they weren't going to make him a pilot, couldn't they have just thrown him into engineering or just basic
Exactly.
mechanics?
That would make total sense. I mean, I remember stories of the World War II. My music teacher, again, he got drafted like everyone else did in Great Britain, and they were in this giant hangar. And it's like, okay, everyone on this side of the aisle is going to work in bombing or bomber engines. Everyone else is going to work on sheet metal and body work. So it's like, okay, that was it. And they didn't care about your skill set. They just knew that you had a certain technical background, and they were going to teach you the skills just because that's what they needed at the time. So that's good to know that they needed that. So they needed bodies and minds and hands. But in this story, it's like, oh, you're now in the Empire. Now you're a ground soldier. Why? No explanation, no struggle, no, gee, I wish it was almost played for comic relief because he says, I'm gonna join the Empire, get some money, blah, blah, blah. And I'm gonna be a pilot. And it's like, boom, you see him on the ground. You're like, 3 years later, why? How?
Yeah, I think it was an attempt at comedy. The problem is that it was a pretty bleak battle, to be fair. I mean, it's kind of difficult to laugh about, to be fair, even for audience members. And it was very abrupt. Maybe if the editing was different, it could have worked. I'm not too sure. But I think I can see Lord and Miller's attempt there. Not sure if that was why they were fired, stuff related to that.
It's hard to say. The scenes themselves, how they were shot, how dark it was. As soon as you jump into that war, it's pitch dark. You just like, where are we? There's explosions. There's people with helmets. Oh, it must be a war. Okay, who? What war? What front? There's no explanation given.
Who are the even fights supposed to be fighting?
Enemies of the Empire. The Empire is just taking everyone over. I have no clue.
They didn't do that. They didn't do that before. I mean, they could have just said, "Oh, blasted rebel scum" or something. That would have been.
Yeah.
I mean, that would have been fan servicey, but it's actually a logical explanation. We know there's a rebellion out there. So if there was a rebellion having a fight over mud, okay then, makes enough sense.
Yeah, they were hiring mercenaries, I guess, because there's the dude. That's where they meet Beckett, and he's like apparently some really good shots, and he's twirling his guns like he's in the old west, and it's like you're in a war zone. What the hell is going on in this world? all these weird things are happening. So it's a little hard to grasp things, especially when it's in the dark. You're at war. You did a time skip seconds ago that spanned three years, and it's just random. It's just totally changing the tone of the story. So
Yeah, and they weren't even wearing stormtrooper outfits.
that is true. What's going on?
That's what shocked me the most. I was like, okay, is he actually in the army? Is he actually a stormtrooper? Because he's not wearing the outfit. I think the only person who was wearing something near to the stormtrooper outfit was the alien with the 6 arms. I think.
It's hard to remember. Yeah, there was so many. You were introduced to so many characters within a short time span, and I do remember them wanting to get a pilot. It's like we already have a pilot. It's like, oh, okay, and then that goes nowhere. So, but then we get introduced to Chewie, and that was, I mean, when I look at this movie, I would call it, Chewie, a Star Wars story, because it's more about using Chewie properly or having him as a sidekick, but he actually has his own little story and his own motivations and his own little goals, despite being a giant walking carpet that could barely talk. So I like that. That was done well. That's like it's good to have lore of a character who's like 180 years old or whatever the hell he is, and who knows how long he was in that prison. Who knows how many people he had to eat, and for some reason he warms up to Han just because Han could gutturally sound his language for a few seconds, and he doesn't tear his arms off as a result. It's like, oh, okay, now he can talk to you normally in English. It's like, so what was the difference? Why did you have to use his language to make him like you more? I don't understand.
To be fair on that point, considering that he's probably had to eat a load of people who are shouting in English, "Don't eat me," it probably would have made him pause to hear someone speaking to him in his mother tongue. So that bit I don't actually struggle with much. The only thing which is confusing is that he throws him around so much before Han even gets the chance to speak in Wookiee. Like the fact that Han spoke in Wookiee and it stopped him, that makes sense to me. Speaking in his mother tongue, that might, make him warm someone up if someone can speak your own language, especially fluently, which I don't think Han could do, but that's a little beside the point. But Han only does this after being thrown around like a rag doll and probably having his back broken 20 times.
Well, yeah, they play it off for laughs. That it's most of, if not all of the languages in Star Wars since the movie's inception have been scatologic or just totally meaningless. There's no phonetics. There's no actual nouns and verbs we could actually pick up on. They do occasionally have the noun, like the specific noun. I think in this movie later on, like I can't remember the exact phrase they were using, but it's mostly scatologic. So for Han or for anyone who's using an English language, then to jump to a scatologic one sounds bizarre and almost ridiculous because that's exactly what they've always been. So you've always had the joke of the protocol droid or someone translating for you, or the alien that could speak English. Like that's just how it goes. So to have the opposite is interesting, but it doesn't really sound. It sounds silly. It doesn't work.
It does look very silly actually, because you just see how people make those kind of noises, and you're like, yeah, I can't imagine humanoid creatures with human vocal systems making such a thing.
Exactly.
And making it work. I mean, that'd be a confusing lexicon to be sure. Just like, I'm not quite sure how you'd make that work. Although to be fair, there's like tutting languages in Africa which work, and clicking languages. So
sure.
Yeah,
there are ways that can work, but the whole language is random to that regard. Comparing to, let's say, Star Trek that has like a phonetic one, like Romulan is pretty phonetic. Klingon is largely guttural, but there are phrases, there are terms, there are words.
Well, so they actually made up the entire language for that.
Yes,
you can learn it if you want.
That's true. Yeah, that's the joy of harder science fiction, and why Star Trek is science fiction, and why Star Wars is sci-fi. it doesn't care about the details. But when you start giving us the details, you got to be accurate. You can't just make a joke out of it. And you'll see the veneer just peeling and peeling and peeling. And when you tell us this is a language, or you show us this is a language, you're like, oh no, don't do that. Don't ever do that.
It's just like, try and learn Wookiee. There's only one phrase you should know.
Yeah.
Just
strangle your throat and make noises. Yeah.
And yeah, glottal. Use the glottis. Oh no, I'm not technically using the glottis. I should know this. What am I using when I do those kind of noises? I'll think about it later. Get my IPA chart up. Just a question on. I think it's pronounced Ehrenreich. Ehrenreich. Ehrenreich's. Right. I pronounced it completely wrong through one of my videos. I just said Ehrenreich. Wasn't happy with myself at the end of it. But about Ehrenreich's performance, I mean, it's a bit strange because when I was watching it, I was in the beginning. I was just going, I can't see this person transforming into Solo or being like Harrison Solo. But towards the end of the film, I felt that he could be Han Solo, like he could turn into Han Solo almost. But for most of the film, to me, he just felt like a Solo-inspired character rather than someone who was going to be Solo, like the one we see in A New Hope. Do you have any? What was your impression? Do you think Ehrenreich did well?
He did a very good job for the talents he was given and what he can do with his voice. I sort of think of it as a Broadway production that goes to another city and they lose the original actor, and another actor gets hired to impersonate that other actor, and they do a very good job. So it's like, yeah, I'm not going to judge him because he doesn't do a Harrison Ford impression, but for what he did, it was decent. It wasn't bad. It certainly wasn't accurate, but he sort of got a value of that, and that's okay because again, we're telling an origin story, so we don't expect the final copy to be on the first screen of the first second of the movie, right? So it's supposed to be this proto Han Solo. Great, we get it. But you could even do that with, let's say, the better example was Anthony Gruber or something. He was like, you can go on YouTube and search him out.
Yes, I think I've seen his impressions.
He is like dead on for doing Harrison Ford. He did a Harrison Ford depiction in some sort of British movie. I can't remember the name, as well as he did his own Harrison Ford Han Solo impression. So like that would have been perfect because then you could take that, you could take this actor, say, okay, I don't want you to do your Harrison Ford Han Solo impression right now. I want you to do a version of that, but mellow it out, make it happier, make it more lighthearted, and then go into the character as the story progresses, because then you want to see his character change. That would have been the best way to do it. But of course, that's ideal conditions. So in this case, you have to nail it as strong as you can. And if you change the character anyway, you have to change it to be closer to the New Hope version. And that's even harder to do. So in this case, because Han Solo never really changed throughout the story, at least in any dramatic way that we could really pick up on, it's good that he had that modicum level of talent and impersonation and just kept it throughout the entire story.
I felt that he did when he was actually flying the Millennium Falcon. It kind of clicked, and towards the end you could go, but it's almost a small subtle changes, but it wasn't that much. I do agree. It's a bit of shame. I think it's a failure on the script, to be fair.
It depends. They did, I think they said over 1,000 interviews or auditions for the part, and apparently he was the first guy. He was the first audition, and it's like, oh, that's telling. So, the first day, the first week, the second week, the third week, it's like, oh, they kept doing more and more and more. I'm sure there were dozens of amazing actors who could have done it. And for whatever reason, they kept going back to the first one as like, you know, the gold standard. Like, all right, are they better than this guy? Are they better than this guy? I don't know how that works on the casting couch. I have no idea. But to hear that story make me go, wait a second, are you serious?
You mentioned a casting sofa. What are you suggesting Iron Reich did?
I don't know what happened, but from what the story tells us, there was certainly a standard that they were so amazed by that they went with it, and they used that as a baseline for all the other guys, which blows my mind because you can imagine in Hollywood the amount of people dying to do impersonations of C-3PO, R2-D2, you know, every character. And to this guy to do it, you're like, what were you listening to? Like, what were you looking for? What were the acting chops you really wanted for a Han Solo origin story character? It doesn't match up very well.
Yeah, I should have got the Gruber guy, which you mentioned. I've forgotten his name already.
Anthony.
Is it Anthony Gruber?
Something like Gruber. I can't remember the last name. Let me check. Here it is. Anthony Ingruber.
Ingruber.
Yeah, let me copy the link to you. I mean, he's just dead on. Like, you can't get any closer than that.
Oh, and I think I've seen it once. It was like, whoa. Yeah, I'm not sure why they didn't get him.
And I'm sure he applied. I'm sure like he would not have missed that.
No, it's like once in a lifetime type of affair, especially once in a lifetime. I don't think Solo's getting a sequel.
Yeah, people would have totally gone for that. So I don't know. Again, we don't know if he would have had a sick day or they had some favoritism going on. We have no idea. So,
or casting sofa. I don't really want to say much more.
Yeah.
Oh dear. I really shouldn't make jokes like that. Get demonetized, get banned very quickly. Okay, so I'm sort of. This seems like we either are going to say a lot about this or very, very, very little. Because this was something the professional critics kept talking about, and it was almost 50-50 in my sample. It was just them saying the romance. Some were like, "Nah, it's fine." Others were, "Yeah, it's dull, lacks chemistry, boring."
It's hard to say because when you're talking about a space opera of anything, it's always a smorgasbord of ideas, of technology, of aliens, of politics. All kinds of things are coming together. So if you see people and they're smiling and looking at each other and they're under duress and they're holding each other, it's like, okay, I mean, I'm not here to analyze their romantic history. They had a few moments here and there. The time jump is a big deal because 3 years is a lot of time for two people not to see each other. And for them to just, start up like nothing, it's hard. And plus you got to keep the story going. So you can't just dawdle on, how are you? What was going on? Do you still have the same feel? They didn't really get into that so much. And that was part of the mystery, because you have to have that mystery for plot reveals later on. So you can't, like, if she's going to start lying or he's going to start lying, great. Then we'll know, because Han is just trying to be a lying dude to charm her again. And, hey, everything's great. It's just been you and me. It's always been you, blah, blah, blah. So there has to be that sense of mystery still, but you still have to have the connection from both sides. And maybe that connection from both sides could have been a little bit more downplayed, a little bit more implied, to make it like, yeah, she still cares, but she's not sure what to do with that, as opposed to them just making out in the closet, or whatever the case was exactly.
It was Lando's cloakroom.
Yeah, and it's like, okay, I guess that's where they stand now. It's just this fling, or is it? Do they still have the same feel? Like, if you met a girlfriend from 3 years ago and she had the same feelings, yeah, it could be another crazy ride, but it would be a big deal. Be like, oh my God, this is like, this serious girl. But we never got that level of seriousness that Han wanted from her. So one-sided, maybe. it never really connected strongly. So maybe that was the nature of their relationship. Maybe they just didn't want to develop it that much because of the reveal later on. Who knows?
The reveal that she basically was betraying him. I mean, it's a little difficult. I agree, because she seems to not like the fact that she's betraying him.
True. Yeah. So she does have like we got the fact that she wasn't lying about it, but she knew her priorities. He was not a priority. He was like, oh, I'm stuck in deep, or I'm now involved in something else. I can't consider you a major part of my life. And that's good. And maybe she was using that secret to keep him doing the job to keep everyone else alive. Who knows? That could also explain it. But it was like you can't really see it as a romance story as a result. It's just an element that happens to. It's a movie that happens to have this bizarre childhood crush thing that becomes something, but doesn't really have anything to do with the story.
Do you think it would have been better if they removed it?
It's hard to say, because I like these stories to have as many dimensions as possible, because we are a space opera. You're allowed to do melodrama. You're allowed to do crazy, silly things. I would say removing things in general is a great idea. So any insight into Solo's character is good. It's how it's done. So yeah, if it's not done right or well, yes, I would recommend getting rid of it. But this was like on the cusp of being something good, because they had the plot reveal later on. They had the twist at the end, and they could have worked with it. They could have pushed it as interesting as it could have gone, and they didn't. And I think that's as a result of time and all the director changes and the reshoots. And it's like, oh, she's not really into him. They're kind of just in this weird heist scenario, and they're just pushing along. It's not so much, hey, let's make this a big part of the plot. Let's make this like Han is really into this girl, and he's doing this for her. And there are times where he has to stop and think, and not, he doesn't want to hurt her and hurt himself, but he also wants to protect his friends. So he's like prioritizing her, and they're looking at each other weird. And it's like, that was never there. It was just Han is all sort of one-sided, and she's just sort of, I'm the seductress, So yeah, you could do it well, and they didn't do it well.
Perhaps it would have been better if it was if Han really was affected by the fact that she betrayed him.
Yes,
he sort of just shrugs. He just rolls with it and goes, "Nah, fine."
He stands at the edge of that hill, watches her fly away, and the next scene he's playing cards. You're like, oh, okay.
Well, I hate being pedantic. Next scene, he's talking to. We'll talk about her later, but Eniphas Ness, and then he's playing cards. But even then, it's just like, meh, whatever. I'm a leaf on the wind. It doesn't bother me. It just. I mean, it didn't. It's like, okay, this didn't really make him grow or affect him as a character.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's what we mean by affecting the plot, meaning affecting the motivation of the main character. And it just rolled off his back like it was nothing.
I mean, the way they could have gotten around it is if they attempted to. So I think the way they could have done it well is if they made it more of a. Dang it, I've lost the words. Kind of like that fling which happens when you think the end of the world is about to take place, or something akin to that. Maybe that could have been a way to get around it. I'm not sure.
I think if you put people under duress, they focus on what's really important. And usually when you're talking about life and death, like military scenarios, all you're focusing on is survival. You're not thinking about, what's in my checking account? Can I pay for groceries tomorrow? You're like, all those things go away. So in light of that, maybe it would have been a great thing to show that he still cares about her, even in those signs of duress, that this is still a priority. Nothing's going to change that. And then when she literally breaks his heart later on in the story, then you got to show that. You got to show this is a big deal to him. He just doesn't go, oh well, that's life. You know, that doesn't make sense. You don't build up a character like that just to and show his motivation. How all he's doing it is for this one girl, and then, oh well, no big deal. So, yeah, you have to have that connection between the plot, the action, and the romance to tie in together. And you have to choose your climax. You really got to figure out what you're going to do with your climax and what that choice means to everyone. And if it's someone else's choice, you gotta run with that. You can't let it go. You can't drop the drama just because your character has to be a stoic or whatever. No, no, no. Explain how he became stoic. Explain why he doesn't give a care anymore. So yeah, maybe they were going to do a sequel. Maybe they had more material. It's really hard to say.
Yeah, I think what their plan was to do a Boba Fett film, which would sort of tie into what happened before. That's what I heard. I'm not actually sure if that's true, but it's just one of those things. I'm not sure what on earth they were thinking about, to be honest. I mean, they sort of just went, "Hey, look, we can make a solo film." Cash grab begins.
Well, if they're going to do the Obi-Wan movie, they really have to like. It's kind of hard to screw that up. They already have the first three episodes to work with. They have the actor who's at the right age, I would imagine. They have enough backstory in the movies and lore to create all kinds of scenarios for Obi-Wan to get involved in. So, I mean, it almost limits the creativity. It focuses what kind of plot they could have, which is almost like it's like there's a hole in the wall. Okay, well, I'm going to put a brick in there. I need the right mortar. I need the right material. I need the right ladder. You know, it's almost like painting by numbers. You know, just fill it in, just go for it. So with Solo, they could have gone anywhere, and they did, which is not what you want to do. You want to sort of limit yourself and really make the most idealized archetype out of this character that needs a back or doesn't need a backstory. But if you're going to give him some substance, give him some value, explain how he's a smuggler and why, not because he won a ship at a card game just because he's always been good at card games. It's just like, what?
I'd just like to point out here that actually in the film he doesn't smuggle anything. He steals. They sort of run away from a blockade, but I can't remember them smuggling anything.
Right. I guess being a thief and smuggling in a starship is very similar. Like this activity is very similar. I can make the jump. Yeah, no problem.
Well, I mean, I guess the ship kind of was on the scope of the Empire, but I got the feeling that in A New Hope, the Imperials weren't looking for it until C-3PO and R2-D2 were known to be on it. So, I mean, wouldn't after that the Kessel Run, wouldn't the entire Empire be after him? Because he's basically escaped a Star Destroyer. He'd be known. Oh dear. Actually, when you think about this, the film gets worse and worse.
Yeah, the details start making you contemplate what was going on and what really was the greatest scum and villainy of Mos Eisley on Tatooine. What was that all about? Is he really the worst there is? Probably not. What has he been doing ever since? We still don't know exactly what made Han Solo Han Solo. We have some set pieces. We have some pieces of lore. And what we discovered about the dice was absolutely stupid. Like, it's just the silliest thing when we watched The Last Jedi. Like, can you imagine you are in love with Han Solo, you marry him, blah, 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 and your brother has been excommunicado for 40 years, and he comes back, and the one thing he gives you is dice which represent your husband's old girlfriend. I mean, it doesn't really... It's not something you want to hold on to. It's not something you want to be remembered. It's like, oh yeah, I remember when my lover, my husband, used to love someone else, and that crazy story they told. It's like, what?
Can't blame Ryan Johnson for that one though.
This is true. This is true. Yeah.
It's fun to say that you can't blame Ryan Johnson for this actually, because it's almost universally old. But well, Ryan Johnson, darn you! But in this case, not really. Yeah, I think we're sort of moving on to the next topic in many ways, relating to what made Solo Solo. Because I mean, the thing is if you want if you want a character to change, if you want a protagonist to transform and develop, they need a lot of heavy obstacles and opponents. I think that's fair to say. But the villains in this film were just a bit empty, I guess would be the best way of putting it.
No, they weren't very good, because what you want out of a villain is you want the best character who can attack the weaknesses of your protagonist. So your antagonist is essentially, I wouldn't say the inverse of the protagonist, like the idealized antagonist. He's like the perfect, if not the best, opponent or foil to your protagonist's weakness. And with Solo or with Han, he doesn't really have any. Maybe he's too trusting, but that's not really a weakness. That's just sort of, he's naive. He's new to the game, and anyone can exploit that. And the fact that you have all these people that do doesn't really make them special. It doesn't really make them. It just shows that your protagonist is a moron. So you have to have something unique about Han that is a flaw that other people can see he can't, but the antagonist is really good at taking apart. And the problem with that is because it's an ensemble cast, he's just part of the team. He's a big part of the team, but he's still just a part of the team. So it doesn't really work that well. It's kind of like watching one of the Oceans movies, Oceans 10, Oceans 11. It's like everyone is on a heist. They all have a specific role. So you have to focus on the weaknesses of one of those pieces and develop them. Have them make a choice. Does it contradict the plan? Does it contradict their flaw? Does it contradict what they really want out of this heist? So you have to do that. And that's why I always point to Chewie, because Chewie is his own character. He's like, frick this, I'm going to go help free my brothers. It's like, okay. He just takes off. And Han's like by himself. All right, I guess I'm doing this myself now. Like, it's just this thing that happens. You're like, oh, should we be paying attention to Chewie now? Like, what's going on? So you really have to get a quality in Han that is like a interpersonal flaw between him and others. And I thought that was going to be the romantic side, because it seems pretty like a good match, but it never really panned out, because again, she was also part of the ensemble. So she was another necessary component. And how was she involved with the heist? It was because the other bad guy was like, well, you're my most trusted lieutenant. You go on. It's like, what? Why?
It's like, oh, isn't she like your second in command, in charge of other nefarious schemes, to maybe arrange visits for other imperial governors to attend your meetings so that you can kill them in cold blood? I mean, isn't she important?
She's important, and she's more of a assassin, sort of seductress, not a fuel hauling thief. It just doesn't work. So, I mean, she made it work, but it's like, why am I going along?
Yeah, I think she asked a good question. Wait, what? Why? I do really feel for Paul Bettany though, having to play Drayden, because you can tell he's giving it his best, but there is nothing. I mean, he just sort of sits around, he kills an Imperial governor, he sits in a big ship, which is rather luxurious. Does he actually do anything?
I'm trying to think exactly what happens, but he's just generic bad guy.
They thought, well, English people sound posh. Posh equals evil. Therefore, I don't have to write. Just put him up. Just put him up there and just say, it's like, hey, Bethany, could you ad blid all of this?
It's like, well, we have Tarkin here. He's British. Like, yeah, he could be a bad guy. Yeah, okay. It's got another Tarkin light. Sort of not quite Sith, not quite Empire. Just he's a crime boss. All right, sure. Throw him some scars, give him some daggers. He's evil. Okay.
Because, you know, guns are overrated, or guns are uncivilized, or something, and this guy cares about being civilized. He does things with the door, with the sword.
That fight scene was so bizarre. I mean, I actually liked the flying hotel casino, whatever he had. It was just like, oh, okay, there's a bar. There's singers and dancers. What is this place? So he has this office, which is just so posh, and there's this giant fight scene that breaks out. You're just like, do you have a gun anywhere? Just pick up a gun. Just shoot the guy.
Oh my word. Yeah, that's I'm not even sure quite what to make of that scene. To be honest. I mean, first, of course, Kyra pretends to betray Solo so that she can betray Drayden after pretending that she was betraying Drayden, although she actually was betraying Drayden. It just didn't make a lot of sense, to be fair.
Yeah, whenever you have a double cross, you really have to give good reasons why that is. And if you're going to do a triple cross, you have to give even better reasons for why that is. So your foundation for doing the double cross has to be solid. It was kind of like, not really. He was just in the way. And then the third one is like, well, I have a higher power to respond to, and you're like, oh, okay, why?
Didn't Drayden also respond to this higher power?
We have to assume that, because they both had access to the office, and it was his office, and she must have seen what that ring does. So it must have been his ring, and you're like, all right, fine. So he was answering to him, and it's like, all right. So it's hard to say. So to go through those jumps is like, ooh, okay. So imagine she was like had two higher powers, or other, like the Empire. Instead of the Empire, it would have been the Jedi or the Resistance or whatever. And to be like, okay, so you're doing this for virtuous reasons? Why? And you wouldn't know, because there'd be no explanation. She just decided to do that. So it's not good enough to have these double crosses for the sake of having them. You have to explain what's in it for her. Why is she doing it? Is she enslaved? Did something happen to her? Were they threatening her? Is she being blackmailed? Blah, 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 blah. We have to know, so we understand why things are happening. That's what a plot is. You have to show the motivations of your characters. And if you don't, then things just happen, and it's random.
Because I agree, because if she just wanted to kill Drayden to get his position, she didn't need to pretend to betray Han to do that, because Han was about to kill him anyway. So,
well, that's her prerogative. Then there's Han, who could have shot Drayden at any point in that scene. He was just talking like, did he want to like trick him? Did my ruse work? Like, okay, I don't have to shoot him then. It's like, shoot him. just blow his head off. Like, you don't have to think about it. Like, he's the problem of everyone in the room. Everyone in the room doesn't like him. Just get rid of him.
Oh, come on. We know that Drayden is so good with those daggers that no blast shot would have met him.
Even when he's drinking and has his head turned for 10 seconds.
Daggers. You know, daggers are for a more civilized age, and the civilized man is quite dangerous to deal with. Speaking of double crosses, Tobias Beckett.
That is
what hey, I'm going along with Solo's plan to trick Drayden. Oh wait, no, I'm not. But I'm not going to kill Drayden, even though he'll be hunting for me. And I was scared in the beginning of the film that he would be hunting for me because I failed the last mission.
Yeah, if there's anyone who wanted Drayden dead, it would have been Beckett. And he didn't hang around to, like, when we finally realized what's going on. It's like, why don't you just take care of, like, you could all escape free. Like, everyone's problems are gone. if this boss dude is gone. Like he's the kingpin, as far as we know. There's no one else you have to answer to. Do that. Get rid of him. And he just walks away. And you're like, oh, okay.
It was bizarre. And it's fun. In a way, would it be fair to say Tobias is supposed to be the main villain? Because in a sense, he is.
I think he's the foil, the main foil to Han, because he essentially is the prototype for Han to follow. Because what happens to him is his entire crew gets killed, and you know, he sort of gives up. He's like, oh, forget this. I don't have my team anymore. I can't do it. And I think Han, I guess, picks up on that and is all right. Well, I don't want to be like you, but I'm going to follow you because you're the best example of surviving in this kind of world. So I don't know. It's hard. It wasn't a bad twist with him and Han. It's just, it wasn't built up in the strongest way possible. I do like the fact that Beckett was sort of, you know, encouraging Han to be like that more, and he ends up being like that. But it didn't have the dramatic weight that you were seeing, because he was so lackadaisy with the plot and the twist. It's just like, yeah, I'm just gonna leave now. You're like, okay.
And be hunted down by Drayden because he's not dead.
Everyone would come after you. I was like, why would you do this?
Maybe it was the daggers. Maybe he just knew Drayden was good at daggers and just thought, I won't try shooting him because clearly, you know, the choreography is going to save him.
Yeah, Beckett is like this amazing shot. He's like, nah, I'm not going to bother. It's like, there's no one around him. There's just like, no one likes the guy. There's no one in the room except for everyone on your side. Just take him out.
Yeah, the ending scenes really do kind of fall apart. I mean, if considering that he is basically Han's main villain, I mean, Han doesn't really have a lot against Drayden. I mean, Drayden's obviously a nuisance and an obstacle, but like, surely it would have made more sense to have like a boss fight, as it were, between Han and Beckett rather than Drayden. Considering that considering that Beckett is the one that's betrayed him, considering that Beckett's taken Chewie hostage, a final sort of confrontation in a warehouse or on a spaceship would be more interesting than just a shoot-off, which is where Han shoots first.
I guess it really depends, because I like how it was done, just because it was clean, and this is like, you know, no more bullshit, no more lessons. I've learned my lesson. I've learned everything I can from you. You betrayed me. You're dead. So that's nice and clean. I like how it was simple.
That is nice.
Yeah. Should it have been the actual main climax? Yes, it should have been, of course, because Dryden was just sort of like this guy who's in the way, and he ends up being this 10-minute fight scene. You're like, okay, whatever.
For some odd reason, I keep imagining this final confrontation between Beckett and Solo being in a warehouse with cranes and lifts, and shooting between these things while they're riding them, and maybe hovering droids. I mean, that's all I think of when I try. And I'm thinking to myself, it looks fun. It looks like something I want to see.
As opposed to two guys waving sticks at each other.
Well, we can't have two people waving sticks at each other in this one.
Or daggers, that would be too.
Oh, no, scrap the blasters. It's like Han Solo, I'm going to do this the civilized way. Dagger. Got these from Drayden.
Yeah, like they do on the street in Tatooine.
It's like, what was the planet's name again, which Solo was on? I can't remember, but this is how we did it back in my streets.
Oh, right, yeah.
Shank, yeah.
Everyone grab a shank. Here we go.
That could have been fun, actually. If it would have changed the tone an awful lot, but I'm not sure what tone they wanted.
The tone, that's a good question. Because, again, I have to go back, because of the genre is space opera, because it's Star Wars, tone is sort of hard to match because everything's different. All the scenes are different. All the settings are alien and based off the drama of the characters. So like A New Hope, it's hopeful. You're going against the Empire. Empire is evil. It's dark. So it's very simple. Tones are obvious. So when you see these, I don't know, is it like a desert world or like Nephris and all these other characters are sort of like scavengers and all dirty and it's all sort of just struggling to survive sort of environment. So to go from this opulent hotel bar setting and then you go into this shootout or whatever you want to call the confrontation with Beckett, it's sort of like, the tone doesn't really change, I wouldn't say. It's just the vibe of the setting, and that's about it. There's no real underlying theme of people going against each other or motivations to do so. It's just sort of, nope, this is the next scene. Nope, here's the next scene. Okay, now we're on the Millennium Falcon. Okay, now we're on a gambling scene. It's like, there's no real tone.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. The character motivations being almost non-existent in some ways. I never really actually thought about how that might affect tone in a film. That's a really interesting point. I've always considered tone to be affected by the actions of the characters, like how bloody is this fist fight, for instance.
Yeah, but then you're talking about setting for like music and sound and perspective and lighting. And again, that's another problem with the movie is some of the lighting just doesn't work. And sometimes there's no music, especially during those war scenes. You're just like, it's dark and there's just explosions and you don't know everyone's shouting. You're just like, I don't know. Am I supposed to feel sad because it's a war? You don't. It just sort of, the tone is almost not irrelevant. So yeah, and some of the music is really good. Like there's a piece of music where they're, as we mentioned before, in the closet, Londo's closet, and there's this whole like 5-minute piece of music written for that, and we get like 12 seconds because it's a short scene, but it's beautiful. It's a beautiful piece of music. So I think the musicians got the concept much clearer than the writers did because they said, okay, there's going to be a romantic scene. It's going to be an interlude. It's going to have this beautiful crescendo and the strings are going to come in and the oboe is going to start playing. It's like, wow, this is great. And then you actually see the scene. It's like, nope, just a little touch. And then boom, Beckett says, what are you doing? Stop fooling around, blah, blah, blah. Like, okay. So I understand that pieces of music aren't perfectly timed with the scenes and there's editing and all that stuff. But, this is the reason why Star Wars works. Is because the music drove the scene and made the drama work. And when you don't pair it up well, when you don't pair up lighting, when you don't understand why characters are behaving the way they're doing, there's no synergy. There's no symmetry between the elements. So especially after when you go into I wouldn't even call it it's a falling action. I wouldn't even say, once it hits that climax, the movie's almost over. So a denouement? Not even. They didn't even have a denouement. It was just done. Got the Millennium Falcon done. We're finished. So the falling action doesn't really. There's no sense of loss. It's just I won the battle with the evil guy, and now I'm going to go talk to Beckett. It's like, oh, okay, go talk to Beckett. That's it.
Yeah. It's rather sad when you talk about it in that manner, actually. Sounds like a really sorry plot.
Well, you don't have to use dramatic structure to explain how things work, but if you look at a climax, anything after a climax is going to be dramatically less. It's going to be less tragic, less exciting, whatever. So to do that, you have to realize everything's going to be subdued. And that's why I thought the shot itself was good because it was clean, it was fast, it was simple, it was a shock, and it's like, yep, that matches. Even though it was kind of like, oh well, this is a second climax. He's like, what is this? Like, what is it? Was the previous scene an anti-climax? Like, what's going on? So
yeah,
it's hard to throw those terms around when the drama isn't working. So
yeah, the only thing I have to add is that you'd exhaust the audience if you try to put in two climaxes.
it can be done. It's just you have to know how to write it, and there's no way that that scene was written well. So
Yeah, it was the actual climax we got, I thought, was a bit shrug type of affair.
As soon as you have two people fighting, and one guy has two daggers and one guy has a gun, you got to pull some serious tactical maneuvers for that to be believable. There's like defenses. The guy's really quick. He can go invisible. Like, you have to really, really explain things or show things very well for me to go, oh, he's still alive. It's been 2 seconds. It's been another 2 seconds. He's still alive. Why is that? You know, like this, there has to be another explanation. Like, he's really good at ducking. It's like, no.
Han Solo just doesn't seem to pull the trigger as he advances.
He's just like,
I can't kill someone so civilized. I mean, look at his daggers.
And I'm fighting a man with daggers, and he has two of them. So if I dodge one or if I block one with my gun, which is stupid, he doesn't bother to hit me in the arm with the other dagger or the back or the head or the leg. It's just, no, I'll wait for him to recover, and then I'll swing the second time. It's like, what are you doing?
It wouldn't be sporting to shoot him while his back was turned. I mean, the guy's got daggers. I mean, let's take it easy on him. It's only a matter of life and death, and of my future, and of my girlfriend's future, and Chewie's being taken away at this point.
It's the same with Kira. She has that sword, and she doesn't properly stab the guy. It's like, listen, you have a sword. You did stab him, but the sword is like 2 feet long. You could keep going. You know, you don't just go 2 inches. It's like, no, all the way, drive it in, maybe slide it around a bit, get the rest of the organs through the rib cage. You know, just puncture that whole back, and then you could have your speech or whatever you want to say. Don't wait around. Just like, do the full motion.
He needs to be alive though to hear these things. I mean, this is the one time in my life I get to say things which are nasty to him, and by darn is he going to hear his actual ears, and in his brain he's going to go, "Oh, I'm offended," before he finally closes his eyes for the last time.
She's just a trained assassin who's really good with bladed weapons. It's like, no, well, I forgot.
Well, no one using guns for an assassination. That's uncivilized. If you do it with style, you've got to do it with katanas, obviously.
Whatever that sword, I don't even know what that sword was. Yeah, I have no idea.
I think it was single-edged. I mean, there's a load of blades which are single-edged, which aren't katanas, but most people only know about the katana. So there is the Craig Mazer, which is also a single-edged, like, greatsword, but it's not as common or as popularly known in the popular mindset. So I'll call it a katana.
Right.
Just little sword facts. I think we should jump to perhaps what was probably the most controversial character and individual in the entire film. One which everyone picked up upon and almost got criticism all round. I think you can guess who this is.
Right, this is Han's droid, called L3.
L337. Well, L3-37 if I want to be pedantic. But where do I begin? I mean, I have an interesting thought about her. I think the direness of her character does not actually come from her ideals. I think it more comes from her attitude and everything else about her. And what I mean by that is that her ideas of droids being independent or having rights, that's interesting. That could have been executed a lot better, but it's really hard to appreciate someone's ideas when the character is bitter self-righteous and just too snarky.
Right, right. I see it as two different things. One of them I compare immediately to C-3PO, because C-3PO, he is a protocol droid. He has a specific function, but he has his own worldview. He has his own understanding and sensibilities, which are not aligned with reality. Like he's in another world as far as the world of Star Wars is. He focuses on etiquette. He's very polite, blah blah blah, and that's his thing. So this to me is just a version of C-3PO, which is just some other bizarre world, and that's fine. And no one bothered to correct that or care. And that's again fine. Droids are toasters. That's a great thing. Now, the one thing I will say about I do like is the talk where she has or it has with Kira, where she's talking about love. And when I mentioned this on Mahler streams and what have you, when we talked about Solo, is that she believes in love. She believes in this higher sense of value towards another person, whether it's a droid or Lando, or Lando. I always get these names off, and that
Don't
to
worry
me,
about
yeah, and to me that elevates the story, because here we have this droid who, yes, she's talking about freedom and justice and all this crap, which is silly, but then she believes in this other thing which everyone understands and says, yeah, I believe in this concept that it does work. And again, this is so it's not implying anything. It's not implying a romantic relationship. It's not implying it's in her head. It's like, no, she actually believes this. And that makes the droid or the character that is saying that much more than just the box of metal and silicon and robotics that she is, or it is. So that to me is probably the more important part of the story, even though it's completely a side character and has nothing to do with the plot, because it informs us that there are elements in the story, even artificial ones, that believe in things that are greater than themselves. So I like that. That was like, oh wow, they actually threw that in there, and they didn't play with it as a silly thing, and because she's a silly character. Like, that's what I thought the character was. It was a joke. It was a joke on all this feminine crap, and it's just comic relief, because that's what C-3PO is. He's a comic relief character. He's in his own world, and oh, we're getting shot. Oh my God, why is everyone so evil? Blah, blah. It's like, yeah, okay, whatever. Same thing with her, only she's more in another direction. And
unbearable.
yeah, it's ridiculous. And to see that scene where she gets shot or it gets shot, and Lando's all crying over that, it's like, oh, okay, your toy is broken or whatever. Repair them, fix them. It's not a big deal. And then to have that be integrated into the navigational computer or whatever is like, okay, sure. I don't know how that works. I don't know why that worked that way. But again, I thought if they didn't have that scene where she talks to Kira, I'd be like, okay, this is stupid. There's nothing for me to look at to say it has any value of, like, again, I'm looking at a character. I don't care if this character is a droid or a person. I just want to know about the character. And if they believe in this thing, that is an element which speaks to me more than just them being a crazy feminist bot. It says a lot more to me than that.
Yeah, there is an element I agree with there. The problem with L3 and even the execution of the belief in romantic love is that it's there, but it's not properly explored. I mean, a good example of an exploration of this type of thing, especially when it relates to hypothetical relations between man and machine, would be Her and Mass Effect 3. Have you seen Her?
What is Her exactly?
It's a film. It's if you get the chance to watch it, you definitely should watch it. So basically, it's about this man who is in the future sometime, about 2050 something, who's very lonely, and what he does is
yeah.
he's a personal assistant AI. So you have seen it?
It's Joaquin Phoenix. I remember what you're talking about. Yeah, I haven't seen it, but I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
Oh, I'd definitely watch it if you get the chance. So in that, it explores the idea of, well, is this really love? Can this work? Is it actually a real thing? Is it just programming? Do machines have the ability to love like that? And Mass Effect 3 does something similar, where it puts you in the position as the player to decide whether you believe it works or not, and actually to influence or to how's the word, encourage the relationship between Edie and Joker, or indeed say, no, this is not appropriate, it's wrong, stop. In both those cases, they bring up the subject of love between man and machine, and stuff like that, and they bring it together to make the audience think about this. Unfortunately, with L3, it seems that they bring this up to make the joke "it just works," and something in the previously about lubricating nuts and bolts. It strikes some odd notes for me, which I really don't like.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't see it as a romantic love. I just saw the concept of love meaning a form of devotion to a person or a thing or an idea. So I never saw it. Okay, yeah, he's totally having sexual relations with uh, a machine. I never connected that. I was like, yeah, that's stupid. There's no, it's not in the story. First off, they never mention it. And when you say love, you imply a bucket of ideas. So you can go that way in your head, but it's not shown. So that's fine. I don't have to worry about it. It's not, in my wagon of imagination. It's not explicitly stated. I don't have to worry about it. So
fortunately, it is implied, not only because it was like, oh, Lando's a pansexual, but also the writers had to have known that these statements would be interpreted in that kind of way. And if they didn't want that to happen, they would have changed them a little bit.
When you imply things and you don't hammer them down, it could be anything. So that's up to interpretation, and that's the point. So unless they actually specify it, then no, we don't have to worry about it. So to have things like that, like big ideas like truth and beauty and love and virtue and vice and all these good things, to keep them up in the air is good because it allows our minds to say, oh, there is more to this character than just nuts and bolts, as it were. So we want those elements. We want to see, for example, Edie in Mass Effect 3 to be more than just an AI who is super smart and can do all these calculations. We want to see some humanity because we are interested in characters as they are trying to be more humane. And that is what I got out of that scene. Not that, oh yeah, she has sex with Lando all the time. It's like, that doesn't really elevate her as a character if that's the case.
Oh no, it doesn't indeed. And considering that it's a children's film, or it's supposed
Exactly.
to be a film, that shouldn't really be in there.
Exactly. And to imply it means that a child can interpret that any way they like, an adult can interpret it any way they like, and that's why it's okay. Because we don't have to worry about, well, what did he really say? Well, he just says love, or she says love, or it says love. That's it. It just works. The relationship between a robot and a man just works. That's fine. You can say that. There's nothing wrong with that. And we don't have to worry about, I mean, there was another YouTuber called Major Lee who he made a video about Solo, and he would not shut up about robot sex, like for 6 or 7 times throughout his video. It's like, dude, you are projecting so hard that you want this to be a real thing. And again, you can do that because it's implied, but it's not literal. So it's not actually in the movie. And that's good. That I like the fact that these high-end concepts, these issues of relationships and how we deal with each other and how we think about each other is more than just a functional relationship. It's more than just a pleasurable relationship. There is something about their character that we can see and point to and say, look, this person is concerned about this vice or this virtue or this ideal, and it's part of their reason for being, if it were. And that's what I love. I love seeing elements, especially from robots. Especially that whole scene from with Edie in Mass Effect 3 reminds me of when she says, "Shepard, I need to talk to you right now. It's very important." It's like, oh, okay, what's? And then she says why she's doing this. It's like, yes, you get it. You figured it out. No matter how super brilliant you are at calculating pi, you figured out why we're fighting, and that was to me such a beautiful scene. And then to have the ending tell us the exact opposite, that no, they're going to kill you all. It's like, no, they're not. We just proved it. We saved the Geth. Edie is my friend. She knows why we're fighting. We're trying to get along. We are getting along. It's working. And then for the ending to then tell us, nah, not important. So in case of L3, it's just a side character we have a glimpse of their humanity, and then it's thrown away. And then we see Lando lamenting the loss of that relationship. And that to me made sense. Not as, oh, I lost my sex toy. It's, oh, I lost my friend. And that's beautiful.
That is the most beautiful interpretation one can have of it, I think. I do, though, sometimes wonder about author intention when it comes to stuff like this.
It's not important. It's really not important because it's so open-ended, we can allow the audience is allowed to interpret that. See, that's one of the few elements in storytelling where it's okay. You don't have to spell everything, because I'm a big proponent of clarity first. You have to be very clear on what the hell this character means and what they're trying to say. So when you have a machine, super logical with a personality and very one-sided, say something like, I think everyone should be friends with everyone else. And I want everyone to be nice. I want even the Empire to be nice. I want the Resistance fighters to be nice. Like that's how you live your life. And you're like, wow, okay. You're an odd droid. But it tells us something about what they see in virtue and humanity and interpersonal relations that makes them more than just a toaster. So you need that even in your non-toaster characters. You want to see the humanity in your villains. You want to see the things that make them believable and real and why is this guy evil? We saw that with Anakin, but in the most bizarre way. After I slaughter everyone and become evil for the sake of saving my wife, she dies anyway, and I go out and scream and bend metal with my mind. Like, okay, a little late for that now, Annie.
What man hasn't bent metal when he's unhappy?
We've discovered that his wife has finally died, even though he did all this work or apparently did all this work to save her life.
Yeah, killing children can't really be counted as work. It's just child's play, if you'll excuse the pun.
Well, they were the Jedi. They were the enemy, so he was clocking in to do his job. So
it's man, I'm not really sure how many more jokes I can make on that. Not sure if it was a seed to be joked about, although there have been so many good memes of it. It's just, if you see the template format, you just have the boy saying, there's too many of them, or there's something wrong, what are we going to do? Or you have them saying, there's X, what are we going to do? And then you just play around with it from there. I'll have to post one of my favorites on Twitter at some point. But yeah, I think that basically concludes the discussion on that character, because we probably shouldn't continue focusing on this one. This is actually a rather interesting point. I was a bit confused about this edition. I do wonder whether these characters shouldn't have been in the story. And that's the Cloud Riders or the Marauders. The critics never really talked about them, because I think that's how much of an impact they had.
Hard to say, because a lot of characters, a lot of movies don't need to exist because they do not directly deal with the character or the protagonist's weakness or the protagonist's plot. They're like miniature versions of the protagonist. Like the Cloud, was it the Cloud Riders who also wanted the The fuel.
Wanted the fuel for their rebellion. I mean, the film sort of implied that they started the rebellion, but that doesn't really fit well with Rogue One.
Right. So what ends up happening is you have these 3 or 4 different kinds of antagonists who all want the same thing, which is okay because the protagonist also wants the fuel, but he wants the fuel so he can give it to the antagonist, as opposed to the antagonist wants the fuel and he's going against the protagonist to get the thing they want. So what ends up happening is you do the thing for the antagonist just because that's the deal that you have going in the story. So then you have to create conflict of something. There's a hurdle you have to pass. So the Cloud Riders are just one of those hurdles that don't really develop the character as a character. They develop the plot as a hurdle to get past, or a plot point to get past. So that's you have to have that, but I mean, it's how you do it that matters. So yeah, I mean, the Cloud Riders were actually not as shallow as I thought. At least they had a backstory. They had a leader, and they had reasons for doing that thing. So imagine that they didn't have a leader. They were just generic bad guys. That would be even worse. So it's good that they had that character. It's not the best explanation for the character, though.
No, I mean, there's 2 kind of problems. The first is they're not really a hurdle. Towards the end of the film, they do influence Solo so that he tries to trick Drayden. So they do have an effect on the plot, but they're not really an obstacle of any sort. And to be honest, they're kind of hard to take seriously when their leader looks to be 16 years old.
And they have like middle-aged to elderly people around them. Yeah, it doesn't quite make too much sense.
I mean, how big was that organization anyway?
It's hard to say because they're on the same planet and they're whatever they're doing in a weird speakeasy in the sand at the top of a hill. It's just like, what? You refine fuel? Really? Okay.
This little shack town does.
Yeah,
it's
hard to wrap your brain around it because they're like a proto resistance, or they're just a resistance, not necessarily the resistance. So
we're using the term resistance rather than rebellion. Oh dear.
I don't know what exactly we would characterize them or categorize them, because they're so sort of, we want to fight the power. It's like, okay, how?
Well, we don't actually see them do much. They kind of botch the previous mission Solo and what's his name, Beckett had. But they don't really do anything else. It's just like they do stuff. Okay. I don't know much about them. I don't know anything about their hierarchy apart from they have a 16-year-old girl or 18-year-old girl leading them, and something related to this planet where people had their tongues cut out.
Right. So they really had to showcase that the Empire is bad, and that was the real enemy, and because they're basically another pair of thieves that is trying to do what Han and Co are trying to do too. So that starts them off, and they learn more about them later on. I'm not like, it's not bad. It's nothing special, and it's better than nothing. So I'm glad there was conflict. I'm glad there was opposition, and I'm glad there was a backstory. Are they any good at it? It's a bit hokey, because as soon as you introduce that girl, you're like, you're 15, 16 years old, you're in charge of these guys? Really? It's like, okay, I don't know about that.
And I do wonder how she's able to carry that big staff thing.
How she's able to do all these maneuvers, how she's able to fight so well. There's a lot of questions that are raised, and they could have done like simple explanation, like I was trained to do this, or I went through all these experiments and they tortured me and now I'm really strong. You're like, oh, okay, that explains why you you can exist, why you're probably the leader because you're the best suited for the job. But we just see a little girl. We're like, okay, why? How? Where did you start? How big is your team? Like, how did you know we were hitting the thing at the same time? Like, there's all these, they have a tracker. Okay, we see the tracker, fine. But the whole setup is a little comes out of nowhere.
Yeah, I mean that it's just like, Solo sees some people coming. Who are these guys? It's the Cloud Riders. Whom? It's out
And
there.
you tie that into the whole on a train idea. It's like, why are you using a train? And I gave the excuse that, well, before you have starships that use the fuel, you have to refine it and you have to get it to places. So you wouldn't be using starships to do that. You're using it the cheapest way possible. So you would transport your material to the refinery and then they would make it and then the ships would come and get it, or you would give it to, like, there has to be a production line of some sort in transport. So it's like, all right, it makes some sense, but it would obviously just be a hell of a lot smarter. The people who want to buy your stuff would actually help out, or you would hire someone to transport stuff for you. And the fastest and cheapest way possible I would imagine, would just be a ship, come down, pick it up, go a few meters or miles in the air, travel 200 miles this way, drop it off, refine it, pick it up again. Pretty straightforward. You don't need a train and a crazy, ridiculous train that's winding through mountains and snow. And I say, okay, this is getting elaborate now. So
I guess they maybe just wanted to. Maybe the designers were just sat in Switzerland or something, and they saw the trams, and then they went, "Yeah, okay, base it off that, but we'll make it high tech."
If they had a giant like storm that was constantly throughout the planet, or there's no way you could get flying machines to land, or some explanation or excuse to get no shuttlecraft or no big ships or freighters or whatever, then great. I can buy that the fact that a train exists, but the fact that the train is like this crazy gyroscope balanced, like the things are moving to the left and to the right, you're like, this is nuts. So yeah, you create an environment for this action scene. And you're just like, why is this train morphing? Why is it on a mountaintop? Why is it on several mountains? Like, just this ridiculous scene. So
made for some nice shots.
Oh yeah, no, that's what I mean. Like, you have to set up your environment properly to believe what's going on. And Star Wars, because it's sci-fi, doesn't really do that well, and that's where you run into some believability problems just on the existence of things, not the technology, not the this is how a lightsaber works, but just the actual physical location of imagining an engineer going, what would be really smart and efficient and quick if we build a tram line through 4 mountains, and instead of going under the mountains, we'll just go around them, but not like on the ground, but like halfway. We'll go like halfway up the mountain, and then we'll start building the tram. It's like, how did you build your tram lines to go? Like, what the amount of time and effort and money to do that? You could have just bought a ship to do that for you, and you would have been your problem would have been solved. So, stuff like that runs through my head as soon as I see that train.
Yeah, although it made for a fun scene, but yeah, it should have been explained in some way, or they could have just reconfigured it. I mean, having the train go underground would actually be kind of fun. You could make that work.
Yes,
that'd be interesting. There's plenty of You say possibilities close, but possibilities open.
Yeah, it doesn't take much. It takes maybe a few lines of dialogue to explain the setting, and that's it. You don't need to go into scientific detail or the history of the war, or why a train exists, and why there's a big boring tunnel through a mountain that laser shot it or whatnot. It's like, no, it's a freaking train. It goes through stuff. It's easier to transport things. It's faster. It's like, great, thanks.
Yeah, that would, yeah. But when the scenes come under scrutiny, of course, they keep falling to pieces. Because it is just like, okay, well, we failed in this mission to get this off this really cool train which goes around multiple mountains, quite a sightseeing tour. But yeah, we failed to get it. Crimson Dawn's not going to be happy. Well, where are they? Oh, they're just right around the corner. And then Crimson Dawn executes, Drayden Voss, acting on behalf of Crimson Dawn, executes a Imperial governor. Apparently he can get away with it without repercussion, but for some odd reason, he cannot use his influence through Imperial governors to get fuel smuggled or otherwise illicitly given to him.
You can't tell anyone that Beckett and company are working on behalf of Crimson Dawn, so he's going to have to kill them all. And then Beckett's like, well, we won't tell anyone.
It's like, that as well.
What a great idea. I guess I can go on this mission and not die. Thank you. It's like, what? Did you even think this through, Mr. Evil boss person? It's like,
is that a failure? Oh dear, I'm going to have to kill you now. Sorry about that. You can't live and learn.
It's like, oh, you can't go and correct your mistake because they know, or people are going to know it's me. It's like, no, we won't tell anyone it's you. It's like, oh, okay, go ahead and do it.
It's just, it is just a bit bizarre. It's like he can't use his Imperial influence to get fuel because he can clearly kill governors without problems. He can't show mercy even when the individuals in question are actually saying, no, give us another chance. We won't tell anyone. We'll do it again. It's just like, well, we need to put these, we need tension. We need tension.
And let's keep in mind the whole plot of this movie exists because the contrived scenario of The Last Jedi exists, which is fuel. So this is like a backstory for Solo and a plot resolution or patcher for The Last Jedi to say that, hey, you know what, boys and girls, in the Star Wars universe, fuel is a thing and it's a problem and everyone needs fuel, blah, 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 blah. You're like, really? Okay. Now it's all right, sure.
It's a plot point now. It wasn't in the last few films, but forget them. We've already said that the expanded universe isn't canon. Eventually, we'll get round to saying the prequels and the original aren't canon.
Yeah, it's the Last Jedi has people escaping a planet who don't have enough fuel for some reason. But the Last Order is chasing after them, and they have all the fuel in the world. You're like, okay.
Now that they've entered the thing of fuel, we really do need to ask about the consumption, about the efficiency of the engines and the like. I think it's opened up a lot of stuff which will certainly be appreciated by some engineering-minded people and hard sci-fi fans. But
well, that's the thing. They bring up the concept of the fusion reactor and the injector or whatever, because they inject the fuel directly into the fusion reactor to escape whatever catastrophe they're in the Millennium Falcon. And they go into details, so they get technical, which I thought, oh, this is new. They're getting into the details of how a starship's engine works, or at least the fusion reactor of a starship engine works. So they're purposely making more lore to explain the believability of how propulsion works with at least the Millennium Falcon. So they're sold on this idea that fuel, like, to me, it's just like, oh, please, like Last Jedi, please. Fuel is really important. It's like you really have to understand that this slow motion car chase in space is a thing, and there's speed, and there's top speed, and there's shields, and there's weapons, and there's distance, and weapons don't affect shields at a certain distance. You're like, okay, we get it. We really want us to like that movie. Sorry, it's not going to happen.
It's like, oh, sorry, but even if we were to ignore some of those aspects, there is that milking scene and other things to recoil against, which is really the problem.
There's plenty to scoff at the new trilogy, and I think Solo is a byproduct of that. unfortunately. And to put it nicely, it's the better product of. I don't know if it's better than Rogue One. I can't say because I haven't watched Rogue One, but I'm imagining that it's probably more entertaining, just because it's a simpler story.
I preferred Rogue One. I didn't really think much of Rogue One though, so it's not as if Rogue One's a great film. I mean, it certainly is. It's highly enjoyable in many ways, but yeah, I don't think you're missing much by not watching Rogue One. I mean, it might give some insight into exactly what on earth is happening in this current Lucasfilm, but otherwise, you can easily skip it. I mean, you've actually brought up the topic quite nicely. As far as the Kessel Run is concerned, it's probably the most enjoyable part of the film. Even though there are some really strange bits like that space worm, which is conveniently next to a black hole, which will kill it. I was just like,
wrap your brain around this. There's a black hole, and there is a space worm, like literally a Cthulhu monster, just chilling out next to a black hole. Just
which
imagine the size of this thing.
What does it even eat? Does it eat things which are spat out by the black hole? Does the black hole turn into a white hole and spit things out which it will chew on?
It's hard. It's really hard to grasp what's going on.
Sorry, continue.
I don't know how to describe this experience. It's kind of like, oh, you're in this giant gas cloud called the Kessel Run or whatever, and there's lightning storms and no one's been in there because it's dangerous. It's like, yeah. And then you find out there's a gigantic, I don't know how you describe the size of this thing.
Gigantian?
Gargantuan would probably do it. Yeah, I don't know. And it's just, this is insane. It's like, what the heck? Why are we, is this a thing in the Star Wars galaxy or universe that there are creatures that are beyond understanding?
Yeah, just the sovereign line, isn't it?
It's like, hey, giant crazy dragon creature thing that defies every law of physics you could think of. It's like, all right.
Foolish creatures of mind and flesh stumbling around in ignorance.
No.
Behold.
Those are believable. Those are actually believable. This is obscenely, over the top, comically, hilariously unbelievable.
To some extent, you could almost imagine this was, you can almost imagine this was like a 12-year-old's idea.
Yes,
but put it in the nebula.
It feels very much like fan fiction. Like this is, I would say, a teenager's version of if they were to write a Solo story. Like they took some kid who's like, "Are you a Star Wars fan? Yes. Would you want to write a story about the background and history of Solo? Yes. All right, you're on board." It's like, oh, okay. Yeah, and they just ran with it. And again, we're talking about 2-3 directors switching with reshoots. So it's like, it would probably have the same level of quality if they had one shot and this was it. So it's pretty much the exact what you're getting from a random kid off the street who likes Star Wars telling us a story about Han Solo. So
to some extent, I think it would be better because it would have a cohesive, coherent, there'd be a coherent feel to it because when you swap directors, obviously. So if this kid was the main force, it would be, interesting, but the tone might be more coherent. I have no idea. I haven't read enough fan fiction written by 12-year-olds concerning Star Wars for reasons which are obvious and should be apparent to all. But no, whenever I think of that giant thing, I'm just like,
Well, what's interesting about the interesting about the story here is it was originally done by Lawrence Kasdan to write the screenplay. And what happened was George Lucas sold the company to Disney in 2012. So then what ended up happening was Kasdan was hired to help finish the script for The Force Awakens, which ended up meaning someone else had to work on the script for Solo.
his son, I think it
His
was.
son, Jonathan Kasdan, had to finish writing this. So it's kind of like my dad wrote this story or an outline or whatever, and then I took that and I finished it off. So sometimes that works out really well when you have a premise and then someone takes that idea and runs with it. I've seen that with Gaiman and his idea for Lucifer, which turned into a great story by Mike Carey, I think. So sometimes it works really well. In this case, we don't know the creation of this thing, and we don't know how the production of this thing exactly went. And it's all about how the vision works out on the screen or in production. So maybe the story was brilliant. Maybe it was crap. We don't know. So I've seen scenarios where there's more than one writer, or a writer takes an idea and runs with it. It could just mean there's too many kitchens or too many chefs in the kitchen. There could be not enough. We don't know, but we know there's more than one. So, and not just more than one chef, more than one kitchen, more than one director, more than one waiter. There's all these hands in the pie.
And
So
and this
yeah,
isn't even mentioning Kathleen Kennedy, obviously, because we don't know what she did.
exactly. We have no idea what the producers' control over all this was, and we never will. So there's obviously a lot of creative differences between scenes, especially with lighting, especially with sound. Just on one media itself or one medium itself, which says a lot. So you can imagine what the script went through, and it shows.
Oh my, it must have been some kind of hell. I can't imagine the poor screenplay writer's like, right, we need to rewrite this, but it needs to work with this, we want that. Oh my word, it would have been such a brain drain. They must have been swallowing paracetamols non-stop.
And imagine how long it took to make. Like this, the reshoots, the marketing, we're talking like close to 200, 300 million bucks just to get this thing out the door. And wow, what a, as we were saying, a high schooler could have done better, probably more coherently, which is kind of sad. So this is kind of like the biggest box office bomb in the entire franchise for Star Wars, and that's pretty sad.
Quality is saddening. As for the actual bombnation of the film in question, it did send a valuable message. So
Caused the Disney to stop pumping out Star Wars movies every year. That's for sure.
yeah, unfortunately, this is going to be a rather how do you say it? Because I have problems pronouncing things. Pyrrhic victory.
Right.
Because I think we all know that. Well, we're all going to try and watch episode 9, I think, and we're going to make our videos on it. We're going to say what we think, criticize what's bad, talk about what's good, and then Star Wars peters out of existence. That's basically the nature of the game at this point.
I don't know. I think Star Wars is going to be around. I don't know how fast or slow the next Star Wars after Episode 9 will come out. But this has to work. Like 9 has to work. And it's such, I mean, it's obviously going to be better than 8 because 8 set the bar so low, so low that anything would be better.
Yeah, but so many of the problems from The Last Jedi are going to find their way into episode 9. It's going to be... Oh, yeah.
It's going to be its own standalone story, essentially. Like you would not have had to watch episode 8 to... Like that's the beauty of really bad trilogies. Like when you look at Mass Effect 2, you could have avoided Mass Effect 2 entirely, and even the first game in that regard, because Mass Effect 3 is like, yeah, you just jump in, doesn't matter. There's no background. You don't need to know anything.
Yeah, that is tragic, though. I mean, what you do want to do with a trilogy when it's designed like this is you want to build off you want to build off and step up, building off what came before. So for Mass Effect 3, it was sad that Mass Effect 2 really didn't mean anything. And for Episode 9, is it Episode 9? I mean, The Last Jedi should have been a good film, which Episode 9 could have rolled with, played with.
It should. It should be able to pick up the pieces, but the thing is, everything's at ground zero. So anything you build will look like, oh, wow, you made a sandcastle amidst an entire desert of desolation. There's nothing there. You could literally do whatever you like. The story did not advance 1 foot from Episode 7. Like, nothing changed. So you could go anywhere. And that's good for freedom, but it's not good for telling a coherent, overarching plot line. So that's bad. That's not what you do in trilogies. When you read The Two Towers, that has to have weight. It has to connect things. It has to set things up for the next book. It has to explain things that came before. It has to progress. And you get that with all these new characters and all these new wars and battles. You can completely erase Episode 8 from your memory. You can, geez, what the hell? The dice are irrelevant. The dice are stupid. The dice don't even exist in. It doesn't make sense. The dice do not make any sense in The Last Jedi.
I feel that you're getting really hooked on the dice point.
Well, because it's the only connecting point, and the thing that did make sense to me was that Luke projects dice, gives them to Leia. They're not real, and yet Leia ends up in the Millennium Falcon anyway. So she's going to see the dice as they. It's like what was the game plan here, Luke? Like what? And then we find out what the dice actually mean. They're a memento of Han's original girlfriend, and she's like, "Why are you holding on to that, Han? You think you're going to find her out there?" It's like, "No, you're not. She's moved on. You've moved on. Get over it." Like, why would you have mementos of failed relationships?
Because I'm about to divorce you? Because that happened, obviously.
Because Han divorced Leia? What?
Well, in The Force Awakens, they're not together. I mean, it's implied that one of them did something to the other and left. I think it was. It's not really explained well, but they divorced. They fell apart. So maybe the dice came back.
Right, so, but why would you even have any hope that you'd ever want to see your old flame that does not want to be with you, specifically betrayed you, and is not looking for you? Why would you even want to have that encounter?
I don't know. Why would Han Solo wear the same clothes for 30 years? I'm not too sure. I'm not too sure. To make a defense of the dice, I mean, this defense falls apart immediately. But the point of the dice is they weren't real. So when Luke gave Leia these dice, which weren't real, it was to tell her that he wasn't there. So that's the reason. The problem is that Leia knew the dice weren't real, presumably. So why wasn't she, trying to find an escape? Why did she just let Poe figure out that this was a distraction? Why didn't she just say, "Hey guys, this is a distraction. We need to find a way out"?
But that's the assumption. She knew they weren't real.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is that the projections don't seem to be able to interact physically with anything.
Well, they do.
They sort of do, because a lightsaber goes through Luke, but
the dice he kisses Leia. I mean, they touch. The dice hit her hands. The dice hit the ground. Then they disappear. So maybe there's like special kinds of force projections. This is getting really stupid now, but
there's my defense gone.
Like they appear to have weight. They appear to have mass, and it's like, okay, they're real. Then they're not real. It's like, wait, then.
I can hear Ryan Johnson in the background going, "Expectations subverted." Ha ha. I really can't.
You don't just play the magic card just because you can in space opera. you use it very deliberately, and like the same with the Princess Bride, right? He's mostly dead. Here's a magic pill. It's like, what are you talking about? But because it's a medieval fantasy world where a machine that could suck life out of you exists, and it's supposedly scientific, it's like, all right, fine. There's some element of science. There's an actual wizard, miracle man who could actually do miracles. You're like, all right, fine. There's a science behind it of some sort. That's enough. Like, there's just enough fantastical elements for you to go, all right, fine. But as soon as you start playing around with lore, like inventing bombers that bomb things in space, it's just like, wait, why is this a thing? How is this a thing? Why are they using these devices? Why are they using these weapons? Couldn't they afford missiles? Couldn't they afford Y-wings? Couldn't they afford more X-wings? Clearly they had more ammunition. One of the first lines of the movie, you learn about the rebels. They're leaving all these munitions behind, and they're leaving. It's like, okay, so they have all this equipment and they're picking and choosing, and then they have a plan. They have a plan to attack the dreadnought, which just appears out of nowhere. Like, oh wow, the dreadnought's here. We can destroy it now. And they have a weak spot, so they have this whole plan of getting rid of the defense towers, and then setting it all up. And you're just like, you have all this intel, you have all the equipment. Why is this the most efficient method? And it's not. Which means all these military minds are morons, and they're using the wrong thing for the wrong tool for the wrong job. And this is how the story progresses. And this is not just seen in Last Jedi, but also with Solo. Like, are these the right guys for the job? No. You're a rich mobster. You go hire some freaking army to get some freaking, go use your connections to go get the fuel. Fine. The first or the Empire doesn't care. It's like, yeah, sure, whatever we want. We need that fuel. Go get it. It's like, okay. Like, there's all these contrivances that could be explained with a simple line of dialogue that just does not happen. And especially with that dice scene, it's so like, what? Who? Why? How?
Do you think the dice and the fuel will reappear in episode 9?
I hope so.
Wait, you hope the dice and the fuel reappear?
I hope so, because it's such a bizarre element. If they were to forget about it, then I'd be like, oh, I feel kind of cheated. I was expecting to see the symbolism of the dice means something else.
I was expecting to have something to criticize.
It's like, oh my god, the dice are back. Oh my god, is someone gonna find Kira? Is Kira gonna pop up? Is someone gonna reminisce about their romantic relations they had 40 years ago? Like, what's going on here?
I'm gonna make memes of you just looking at dice in rage now, I think.
God. Those dice represent the Star Wars franchise so well. People say it's Luke drinking the milk. I say, nope, that's the dice man.
No, I say it's the milk.
I leave milk to the Black Panther story. I think that's the best way to put the milk into. The Black Panther movie. I think that's the best use of milk.
I can't remember milk in Black Panther. I'm not sure what you're referring to.
The rhinos. The reason why they have animal husbandry of rhinos.
Wait.
There's no other explanation why they have rhinos.
Wait a minute. Yeah, they were riding rhinos. Was there a scene of them milking those things?
No, but that's the implication, because what the hell are you doing with rhinos and having them walk and, like, taking care of them? It's like, what are you doing? They're freaking rhinos.
I don't know. You could probably domesticate some rhinos and breed them to produce milk.
Yeah, that's what I mean. You'd have to have like why would you have stables? Why would you have they're freaking rhinos. Just leave them alone.
Well, to be fair, you can ride them into combat, but
if you have metal that can absorb kinetic energy, you don't need any kind of vehicle. You can just walk into any battlefield and kill everyone with your fists. if that's the case. They would be able to stop you. You're essentially invincible. You know, nothing could puncture you. Nothing could stop you. I guess it would be kind of fun to ride a rhino. And maybe
Or scary.
You cover the rhino in the vibranium. That might work. And they just destroy everything.
Well, if rhinos are anything like elephants, you don't want them to go rogue. And if they're wearing invincible metal, that might be a problem.
I think that'd be pretty entertaining. I'd want to see some rhinos covered, because those suits just you press a button, they just cover your entire skin. It's like, hey, do that to a rhino. Cover a rhino in all that suit. It'll work great.
Now we just sound like a bunch of teenage fanfic writers who've just watched Black Panther and gone, power armor for rhinos, of course.
Exactly. That would be. They'd be like twice as strong, twice as fast. They'd have the speed of a horse, but they could ram things like a truck. And you can't shoot them, you can't puncture them. They're just, you have to like drown them or something. I have no idea. Something would cause them to stop. So water is their only weakness, or I don't know, large mud planes. They just can't. They're too heavy. You know.
I guess there's a fail-safe kill switch.
Yeah, you could have like a remote, one of those balls that does everything. They have those balls in the Black Panther movie. They just throw them and they like heal people and track things and disable things. It's like amazing balls. Just do everything. Just throw balls at people.
It's what is it? Unobtainium and plot device. Actually, someone raises a point in the comment section. I imagine the reality of the situation is because they ride them, they keep them like horses, but since that hut village is the fake front Wakanda presented to the world, everyone must think they're mad.
Yeah, they're a bunch of crazy African hicks who just, for some crazy reason, started raising rhinos.
Yeah, I mean, people would want to visit Wakanda, though, if even if they thought it was a normal African nation, just because they have domesticated rhinos. Who wouldn't want to go?
I guess there'd be some safari people who'd want to check it out. Yeah, for sure.
Would the PETA just get angry that they were domesticated?
They would, but they'd have like protections from the government, so they could officially own their property, so they would be protected under that. So they couldn't do anything about it. So I don't know if that would be official, but it would probably be. You're imagining like a tribesman having official documents from a higher government say, yeah, I could own the land, I could domesticate these rhinos for my own purposes. Why not?
That's yeah. This conversation gets more interesting, especially when we stop talking about Solo and then focus on Dice, Rhinos, and Black Panther. Since we're on the subject, I should ask, what do you think of the nomination?
Having not actually seen the movie myself, I can't really say whether that's worthy of the title. So, it's definitely a meme-worthy movie, and if they're going to be basing it off popularity, I think that's a good thing. Like, obviously, a popular movie is going to catch the eye of critics and especially the Academy. So it makes sense. It's strange because there's so many Marvel movies that came out. So, yeah, it makes sense. I'm not part of this Hollywood elite critic group, but it does make sense they would choose the most popular. And I don't know what it has to do with black actors or black culture, because it's one of the only examples I could think of what's referred to as Afro sci-fi, or science fiction written by African writers who may or may not actually have certain cultural African themes, like drums or names or other religious or spiritual terms associated with their science fiction. But it's definitely a category which I was unaware of until last year, because when I read science fiction, I don't really care who wrote it. I don't really care where they're from. I don't care what they intend to do with the work. I care about what they actually wrote. And some stories do have elements of tribalism and even in futuristic scenarios. So it's like, oh, it's good to know. It's good to know that there is actually subcategories or subgenres of science fiction. I think that's good to know. But it then makes you wonder, well, what's the big deal? Why even bother focusing on the writers? So not all writers who are black or African write specific kind of science fiction that is about African culture. They just happen to be black. So we get that with the one of the Andromeda writers for Mass Effect Andromeda, N.L. Nemison or whatever. She wrote the not the Apex story, Ascension. I can't remember the name of it, but it came out before Mass Effect Andromeda came out, so that's sort of put her on the map, at least within that community. But the same with Black Panther. That writer was already a science fiction writer, and she happened to be black as well. So it's like, I don't really care, but more power to them if it makes them sell more books and it gets more people interested. So I think it's great. I think it's good for people to watch these movies and critique them and enjoy them, of course.
I feel that if you watch Black Panther, you'd be like, oh.
Well, again, I don't put too much credence into superhero movies.
Yeah, that's a fair point. Although if we're going by most popular category, I think Infinity War is probably more popular than Black Panther.
I don't know in terms of the box office, though. I have no idea.
I would have to check, but I can imagine that the box office is bigger for Infinity War.
Okay, then it has to be a politically minded people. There's the only other explanation I could think of.
Unfortunately, but then the Academy has become very politically minded as of late.
I think it's been that way for a while.
That's a fair point. It probably has, but I think it starts. I don't know. Maybe they're just being more flippant about it.
Nowadays, yeah, I would not be surprised if that's the case. So, again, it's an award show. Doesn't mean a damn thing. Bravo! If it gets more science fiction stories being published, I'm all for it. Whether it's Infinity War, whether it's Black Panther, whether it's the second Ant-Man movie, whatever, they obviously have a well-oiled machine, and they know what they're doing. And kudos to them for making these movies. They're obviously entertaining, whether they're completely logical and make sense, and they don't make you laugh out of sheer ridiculousness of the believability of technology. And I mean, come on, you have a piece of armor that covers your body, it's skin tight, that absorbs all kinetic energy. I mean, that's it's like, oh, we just solved World War. We're done. We don't have to fight anymore. We have this invincible strongman that could walk into any country, give him like 2 months, and he'll annihilate everyone until they surrender. It's like, you can't stop the guy.
And for some reason, Wakanda doesn't conquer anyone, or hasn't conquered anyone.
It's the rhinos. They got to take care of the rhinos. They don't want to put them in any danger. Their facade is so important to them, they don't want to ruin it.
And it's like, look, we'd love to go and conquer other nations and conquer other people, but then our rhinos could be endangered.
Yeah, we got to keep the Trumpian view of making Wakanda great is to just isolate themselves and have all their trade be internal. And since they have all the best technology anyway, they don't really need anything else. So it's.
And since they have effectively built a science fiction wall and they aren't accepting immigrants, yeah, I suppose it's the isolationist Trumpian view. Not quite sure that's what the creators wanted to be approving of, though. That's the irony.
That is true, but it makes perfect sense. And all they have to worry about is the welfare system, because, again, you have people who are raising rhinos, and then you have people who are flying in spaceships. So there's a big jump between the middle class, if there is a middle class, and the poor and the elitist aristocracy or whoever I don't even know. I haven't seen the movie. So.
It's the king is decided by combat.
Oh, brilliant.
Yeah.
That's brilliant. Who has all the invincible armor? The royalty. Oh,
yeah. For some odd reason, nobody set up a proper aristocracy with inheritance.
Who gets the invincible equipment? Oh, just the king. All right. How are you guys determined? By combat. Oh, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, the royal guard are armed with spears.
Spears, really?
And all female. It really is a bizarre film.
That sounds like they were taking notes from Wonder Woman or something.
I'm not sure whom they were taking notes from. It is a bizarre film. If you want to have a laugh or something, you could watch it. King by combat is the best way to decide your leadership. No, aristocracy by inheritance is the best way to decide leadership. Most stable way to decide leadership. I mean, imagine the problems really that would solve that would create with the combat. I mean, you just wait until the king's sick.
He has the flu.
It's like, no, it must happen now. Only Skyon, he says, only Black Panther gets the flower power and armor, but has a royal guard that don't get anything. That is true.
There's flower power? What's that?
Basically, the way the story goes, a meteorite fell to Earth and hit Wakanda, and it had that special metal, vibranium, and basically it affected some plant life, which creates this flower, which if you eat it, you will turn into a really powerful person. So the Black Panther, who's the king of Wakanda, has to eat this flower. But if he's trialed in combat, he has to take something which will negate the effects of this flower, so that it's a fair fight.
Oh, okay. So they can't use the armor at all.
No, the armor could be worn even if you didn't have the flower, though, I'm guessing. Or you could modify it so you didn't need the flower.
Okay, so this vibranium could do two things. It makes plant life turn you into Superman or superhuman, and it makes you indestructible. That's a good combination for building an empire.
Yeah, which is why it's strange I haven't conquered anyone.
It's kind of like being Alexander the Great. You're like, okay, I'm going to lead every charge, and everyone get behind me. You know?
Yeah,
so one line.
It's like, we could just let him take him out by himself. No, Sextus Mason makes a good point. You have to turn the flower into purple drink first. True, but that's not really a stretch, is it? I mean, oh dear, I have to grind up this flour and make it into a drink. Oh my word, that takes so much time. I can't be bothered.
And you have to give it to all the guys running behind you so they can catch up. So it's like, oh, okay, you may as well drink the flour and run with me. So take over Mesopotamia. Just whoosh, keep running.
No, and if you got the rhino's trunk on this stuff,
wow,
then you wouldn't have to worry because the rhinos just wouldn't be killed.
Rhinos would just like you would ride the rhinos with the armor, and they have armor, and you're like, you know, like two bulls. And you're just like pulling them on the reins, and you're just knocking over walls. Just all the fences just get flattened.
You can imagine the scene from 300 playing out a little differently if one of those super jacked rhinos with the armor was running at them.
Launching spears like ding, ding, ding.
Oh, it wouldn't be as epic. Oh, wait, it would be even more epic. Oh, wow.
They'd be jumping twice their height. They'd just be like, whoa. That'd be amazing.
Part of me hopes someone watching the stream decides to write the story. Or just do the art. I can't do it.
You get some stray rhino just grazing on flowers, and then some of the flowers get caught up in his food, and he just keeps chewing and chewing. He's just getting bigger and bigger. Like, whoa, what happened to that? What happened to Tommy over there? He's a bit big. What did he eat? What'd you feed him? It's like, nothing.
No, so, not sharing our secrets with the rest of the world. To keep our rhinos strong and safe, we must build a wall. Keep the secrets of the purple flower, obviously, outside of our rivals. Otherwise, they'd have super rhinos.
I think the purple flower would probably be the better export if they really wanted to keep vibranium, because vibranium is probably a limited resource.
They seem to be rolling in stuff in the film, to be fair.
Oh, yeah? Really?
The flower is the thing that's rare.
Oh, that's strange.
Kind of rare. I mean, they have it in small garden quantities.
See, that to me sounds like that would cure a lot of the Earth's problems if you had this serum that would turn people into Captain America.
It sounds like it would create more problems, to be honest.
Well, if you're weak and fragile, like would be like this. Oh, your organs are getting destroyed, or you have MS, or you have some sort of degenerative disease, and you get a shot of that. It's like, bam, I'm now normal.
But you could also turn you superhuman, and then you have a bunch of superhumans walking around the planet. A lot of them, about 6 billion, maybe.
Might be
deciding to hit each other.
Might be better than heroin. I don't know. It could be the coolest street drug ever.
Well, we're looking at amazing street fights with these people are like this.
Yeah, they'd be roided out of their minds, just like, have them deal it out. Well, the police will just sit back, like, yeah, you guys done? Okay. The winner's coming back to us at the station. If not, we're putting a hole in your head. Let's go.
Oh my! I think it would cause so many problems. But you could cure all the epidemics in Africa.
There's an idea. Hey, African superior culture people, help your brethren.
Or Sex and Mason is saying they don't need the purple juice to save people. All you need are those magic balls. Yeah. They do super those things.
I hear they do it just about everything. So.
Yeah, it's what do you call it when you have a material which is plot contrivance and plot?
Yeah.
What is the term?
There's two of them. One of them is unobtainium, and the other one is called phlebotinum.
Phlebotinum.
Yeah.
Unobtainium. I think phlebotinum. What's flu? Can you define?
I don't know the exact definition. I know unobtainium was the actual term they used in that
Cold War
Avatar, I think. Again, I haven't seen Avatar. I just because I know the trope, and that's the name they give it. But phlebotinum is kind of like that substance, like the purple flower. It's still this really hard to find substance which can push the plot forward. So it's kind of like a plot device, and it's sort of forgotten because it's this amazingly powerful thing. But it's never the central conflict. It's never like the way that it is in Avatar. Avatar and all the war is about the unobtainium, whereas this is the stuff that makes your cars float. The same thing with Mass Effect, Element Zero. It's in small amounts, but it's really useful. But it's commonplace, so everyone knows about it, and it's not like the central focus of the story. So when we say phlebotinum, we talk about applied phlebotinum. So it's like this substance that can do, like, I guess that's exactly what the metal is in Black Panther. I don't know exactly, but yeah, if you want magic to happen, throw the phlebotinum together. Like nanotechnology is a very good example where you just have small robots. They do everything for you. They could build structures. They could heal the sick. They can make you strong. It's just that sort of thing.
It's Omnigel, isn't it? Like from Mass Effect.
Yeah, it's the same idea. It's not like a big deal, but it just solves all your problems.
Used incorrectly, obviously, but if it would be bad. But yeah, that makes sense. Someone has just said, Scion has just said, well, funny thing is, they have sex slaves or just African raiders right outside their borders, but we only see T'Challa deal with them and never anyone else. Yeah, that does get kind of dark. It's like, no, we can't get involved with them. They'd find out about the rhinos.
Yep. You gotta maintain the That's why rhinos are so important. If you don't have the rhinos, the facade of the whole structure of society just crumbles. So you got to maintain this whole farming rhino culture. And if you don't do that, then people are going to start asking questions.
Whom exactly?
Safari people, visitors, the poor. See, the poor have to remain poor, so they have to keep farming rhinos, and they're allowed into the magical veil that is Wakanda. So it's like, oh wow, look, we could have dinner once a month in one of our restaurants. Great. Okay, back to your stables where you milk the rhinos. So whatever. And I don't think they actually use the rhino milk. They just give the illusion that they buy and sell just to keep the people in power there, and the poor people milking the rhinos. So there's a give and take, but not enough to uplift them outside of animal husbandry. So they're stuck on the farm outside the veil, whatever the wall is. So yeah, you got to keep that. You got to maintain the social order of things in Wakanda, or else the whole system collapses.
Yeah, if the world finds out they're not just simple rhino farmers.
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
thing is that, I mean, someone was just mentioning in the comment section that that there seems to be a massive wealth gap. Like there's streets made of mud in Wakanda, and yet there's great skyscrapers and buildings.
Yes.
So the real question is, who owns the rhinos? Does everyone just have their own rhinos? Is it a monopolized farming system?
It would have to be subsidied by the government because again, the government's in power. So the monarchy would subsidy everything, if not most of the things. So yeah, it would be farmers first. Then it would be whatever they produce if it's useful. If not, again, why we assume the rhino milk is useless because we don't know what it's used for. But there's not too many of them, so it takes time and resources. Not everyone wants to do it. So it's more like a historical tribal thing. So, oh, it's the family who does the rhinos. Oh, yeah, it's the Smiths. Yeah, we know them. In this, fifth generation or whatever. And yeah, they keep that sequestered from the middle class, and they're the ones who make all the cool doodads that aren't too advanced, but they're like, how Japan makes cellular technology that's amazing, and we get versions of that over the years. Like if you go to Japan and you want a cell phone, they have like 20 different kinds of versions of networks to connect to and sizes, kind of phone. This is back in the early 2000s. Nowadays, who knows what the hell they have? So that's what I imagine the middle class to be. And of course, the cutting edge aristocracy has all the ridiculous crap like rocket ships and teleportation. And God knows if they could use nanotech to make indestructible suits of armor. I mean, who knows what else? They could cure cancers like a cell. We're worried about a cell mutating. It's like, that's nothing to them. They would have almost full control over the microscopic if they could make suits that come out of nowhere when you press a button. So
yeah, this has been a pretty incredible conversation. I'm wondering if we should end the live stream here, but I think we should give a minute for questions to come in if that's the case.
Sure.
What about the grey goo problem? Which is the grey goo problem? I can't read your name. I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm not sure what he's referring to by grey goo.
I'm trying to think myself. Yeah, I don't know.
He's probably referring to something in the film. I watched a while ago. I'll admit. I played a drinking game while watching it with a friend. Yeah, it was a shot for anything which could be perceived as anti-progressive. That's a dangerous game to play while watching Black Panther.
Oh, really? Because I thought L3 was a joke on the whole. Like I thought there was a not a pastiche.
No. Oh no, I was talking about Black Panther rather than.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I haven't seen it, so I don't know. But
I mean, it's a really strange thing. There's a lot of things which will which will be appreciated by those with the progressive mindset. But there are things which, if you wanted to be panicky about, you would get angry with. So it's an interesting film for sure. But there is one scene which was worth 3 shots.
Oh, that bad.
Well, that one was actually the one which was perhaps very little interpretation about it. Okay, nano machines freaking out. And oh, of course, the great goo problem, as in what happens if you have nano machines freaking out and replicating junk endlessly and becoming some unstoppable Armageddon force.
Oh.
That's what it's referring to. To be fair, I don't think Wakanda actually had nanotech. They just had magic metals.
Well, how would they be able to make a suit of armor that pops out of your necklace that could cover your entire body? It would have to be nanotechnology.
Maybe, but it's never really. Oh, maybe it is actually, but it's been a while. But yeah, maybe. I don't know. Maybe rhino milk stops it. I don't know.
The problem with that is if you're replicating a substance that can absorb all kinetic energy, how are you going to stop? Like, you can't stop it physically, so you'd have to use non-kinetic means. So thermal energy, nuclear energy, electromagnetic, that could work.
Well, no one's domesticated rhinos and milked them, so we don't exactly know what they can do, what they'll do. I don't know. Maybe there's things you can do with rhino milk which doesn't interact on a physical level.
Yeah, is there anything that can stop Black Panther in his suit? Like, I don't know.
Have you watched Infinity War?
No.
There is one thing. One definite thing. That's about it. I know the suit can be punctured.
Really?
Well, it can be with some weapons, but like vibranium weapons. But the suits can fix themselves.
So vibranium can break vibranium.
It seems to be like that, because the villain gets stabbed.
That's interesting. Okay, then I guess it doesn't absorb all kinetic energy if that's the case.
Yeah, just mostly bludgeoning. Yeah, it's just like that moment in Dungeons and Dragons. All right, the creature's immune to bludgeoning damage. Where's my spear? Or it's
sure.
like, oh, these swords aren't working on this golem. Well, how would I have guessed, considering how it's made of metal? Where's the hammer? Yeah, it is a bit game theory-ish, isn't it?
I'm immune to poison. It's like, okay, so if I shoot you in the head, you're going to die? Well, yeah. It's like, oh.
Yeah, but not from the poison. If you put poison on the tip of the arrow, the poison won't kill me. That's the one thing I can actually be happy about. And now there's a conversation about nanotech in the chat. It can only absorb so much damage before breaking down, I think. Yeah, they cancel each other out, I think. Maybe I need to watch Black Panther again and make a video on it. I'm not sure.
I'm not sure it's that intelligent. I have a feeling it's not going to be that hard science fiction explainable.
Would it even be fair to call it science fiction? Isn't it like more science fantasy?
Yes, I would. Like, there are stories that have science fiction in them, but they're not necessarily science fiction. So because we call it a subgenre, I don't know what the tenets of that subgenre are. And when we create a term like Afro sci-fi, you're not really talking about the elements of sci-fi being hard or soft. You're talking about what the African element in science fiction is. So because it has to do with a tribe in Africa or whatever, then that's the focus. That's where you put all your attention to. So yeah, I don't think there's a standard. It's like, I'd have to read it, what the subgenre means, but there's probably no standard for hard or soft.
Is there actually a subgenre called Afro sci-fi?
Oh yeah.
Really?
Yeah, that's the term that you could actually buy. There's like a 4th or 5th edition called Afro sci-fi, where they have all these blacker or African authors who wrote in a short story or a story anthology, a bunch of stories. So that's how you learn about these authors. They write normal novellas or novels as well, and they're known throughout the communities apparently.
Do they have specific conventions?
I don't know. I've never heard of them, but I do know there are definitely writers in Africa who have their own conventions for sure. I don't know if that's a thing in North America. I don't know.
I must admit, I'm not actually on top of the sci-fi scene.
It's it's not something you really care about these days because ever since the late 90s, the Nebula Award has kind of been a joke. And you sort of just go, yeah, I probably am not going to bother learning about all the scientific authors that have come before that, or come after that, rather. So, yeah, I don't know. I don't think it's really something that's prestigious anymore.
I got that impression. Isn't that... What's the Hugo Award? Is that related to sci-fi or?
Yeah, well, that's one of the better ones because you're talking about the Hugo Gernsback, the original writer that the term was based off. That one has a little. That's based off actual writers, like the guys who make up the committee who give out the award. They're actual science fiction authors, so that has a lot more credibility. It's not as prestigious just because it's not as big, but if I was a sci-fi author and I wanted to really prove myself in the sci-fi or science fiction world, that would be the award I would strive for. Yeah.
That's kind of cool, actually. Yeah, I don't know particularly much about sci-fi. It's not actually what I read, ironically.
Science fiction and fantasy will always be with us, whether we read it or not. So you don't have to be a fan.
That is true. That is true indeed. Right. I suppose we better wrap up here. We've kind of strayed far, far away from the original topic of the conversation. But in
what
a
we're trying
way.
to say is Solo is not that entertaining a movie. So if you want to watch it, go right ahead. But don't hold your breath. There's other better stories out there.
Yeah, I'd say precisely the same thing, and just add that it is more entertaining than The Last Jedi. It's basically what I predicted in that sense. I was actually, the one thing I predicted which did not actually take place was I was expecting that there'd be some scene where Solo was emasculated by a woman. That didn't happen, as far as I can tell.
That's wow. I probably wouldn't have predicted that either.
I mean, considering Holdo in The Last Jedi, I was thinking of something like that. That's what I mean by emasculate.
That would have been really blatant. Like that would have been, okay, Disney is out to lunch. And the funny thing with Solo is it's not that bad. It's not nowhere near good, but it's certainly not horrible. And it did not do well because of the backlash from The Last Jedi. So it's going to happen with Episode 9 as well. It's going to happen. It's going to happen for the next few movies, I bet. Star Wars is dead to a lot of people, unfortunately.
To be honest, I think it will basically be non-existent by the time Episode 9 comes out, because I think there's a lot of us who are wanting to see what Episode 9 will do. I'm personally, I'm not, after Episode 9, I'm not interested.
I think we'll still have Star Wars. I think we'll still have it in the popular realm. It's just going to take a totally different view, like the same with Battlefront and, geez, all the canceled EA Star Wars games. Like, it's people want it. They still are interested. Like, there's still Star Wars Heroes on mobile. That's been going on for years now. So these games and media, they're there. People still want them. They're just pissed off at what Disney has done specifically. So if it ever changes reins or hands, creative control, like imagine BioWare getting the rights to KOTOR again, or Obsidian That would, like, I would be excited for that. So what we're getting right now is crap. So the next few movies, they could be better. We don't know. But what Disney is doing is horrible, and everyone knows it's horrible. Even the ridiculous defenders of The Last Jedi know it's horrible. They're not blind and dumb. They're just making up little worlds in their brains because they are the lowest common denominator. They're the people who will defend it just because there are lightsabers and X-wings and John Williams and whatever else they want. They get it, as opposed to, oh, there's actually quality here, and I understand. They don't care to understand the scenes and the characters. They just want to see things blow up, and they want to see things be awesome. They will defend it just because they got their one thing, as opposed to getting a good sci-fi movie.
That may be a little uncharitable to some of them. I do want to ask a specific person in a very friendly way just why he likes it and what he hopes it does. I'd like to know, and like to invite them on a live stream and just say, just tell me what you like about it. Tell me why it's good, and not criticize them. I'm just genuinely interested.
The answers I've received from people that I've had in chats and emails and what have you are, everything's fine. I don't care about logic. I don't care about lore. I care about seeing cool things. And that's it. If they get their cool shots of things blowing up, of characters doing things that look cool, they're happy. And that's all they want out of a Star Wars movie. I can understand wanting to go to the movie theater to see action in space and not use my brain. I get that. But you're insulting everyone who came before you. And if there's anything I know about writing of, especially an existing franchise, you know it, you are standing on the shoulders of giants. You know that there's someone out there who's better than you are. And if you want to add to that, you have to know how to do it. And when you have characters like Rian Johnson who don't know what they're doing, and they say, I'm going to do my own thing, without respecting the audience, you've already failed at what you're trying to do. So sadly, that's what we're in right now. Hopefully that, after a few years, that will go away. Hopefully. Maybe they'll learn their lesson after they keep losing hundreds and hundreds more millions of dollars at the box office. But it will take some time. So that's it.
I suppose so. We'll wait and see, obviously. I'm just hoping that there's a new franchise or something, or just a new art.
That's true. Yeah, I haven't seen any real science fiction-ish, aside from Guardians of the Galaxy, but that's all part of Marvel's Infinity War storyline now. I haven't really seen any movie. Well, aside from TV, maybe there's The Expanse, but that's, it's its own beast, and it's not. I can imagine a video game series based off that franchise. That would be interesting, but it's not space opera. It's sort of hard science fiction, contemporary setting, just 100 years or whatever in the future. So, there's no new Mass Effect that I could foresee. Cyberpunk 2077, maybe, but that's cyberpunk. That's not space opera. So we're waiting. Yeah,
we're waiting for something which will, I don't know, connect on a deeper level, I suppose, and be well written, logical, thought out.
Yes, logic is one of the most important elements in science fiction. Lore consistency. Same with murder mysteries. You have to explain things logically. You have to allow the audience to understand things logically. And when you don't do that, even in a space opera where you don't have to explain everything, you are already alienating your audience. And with Solo, that's not so much the problem. It's just not very well written. So Solo has its own problems. And the believability of the physical world is not one of it. It's just, a better writer would have done a better job, obviously, without having an issue of consistency. It's just purely not too good setups, not too good payoffs, plot twists that don't work, elements like audio and music and visuals, like lighting, that just does not work. So there's lots of errors in the movie. But if you turn your brain off and you think like those TLJ fans, you'll have a great time, which is sadly not why we watch movies, even the dumb ones. We want to be entertained on every level, even if it's just romance or drama. We want, give us the hot dog with everything on it. It's still a hot dog. Just give me everything I could possibly want out of a hot dog. That's what we want.
Yeah. I think, though, there is also the other element. I mean, it's really hard to define, and it sounds so subjective, like completely. But there is something about I don't know, art having its own soul, if that makes sense, or having, I don't know, something. You were talking about, for instance, how L337 is talking about love and the higher ideal of love. I think to some extent art needs something like that. Otherwise it will be very entertaining, but maybe not great.
Anything that speaks to a more higher concept of the human condition is interesting. Like, for example, The Fifth Element is a space opera. And the whole idea behind The Fifth Element, even though I don't think it was expressed very well, that ends up being an entire plot device, is the concept of love. And it was ham-fisted, it was forced, it was not set up properly. It's almost unbelievable, but it gets reduced to romantic love or of some nature we can't quite define as being the fifth element. And that could have been done in a much more meaningful way, but it doesn't work too well within the genre of space opera, because space opera is supposed to be melodramatic. It's supposed to be bombastic and big and epic and all these things happening at once. Doesn't mean they couldn't have done that, because they certainly had more than enough time and production values to have comedy and drama and action and a literal opera singer and all these other things. So they could have developed a relationship between two characters, but just really hard to do when one of them can barely speak English and is an action figure, and the other one is an ex-Marine cab driver. It doesn't really work. It could have. I think if you gave that story to Neil Gaiman or anyone, they would have like, no problem. I can make this love romance work. And it ended up being more of a comic book style love than an actual believable romance. So yeah, beautiful idea. Just execution was very poor.
Yeah, well, I think they weren't aiming for the space opera, to be fair. But yeah, perhaps that theme could have been explored more closely. I don't know. I really do need to think. I really need to read more philosophy on art, I think.
The philosophy of aesthetics is interesting, but I would say you need to watch more just watch more movies, read more books in general. So don't just read space opera. Don't just watch romance. Just find great stories, and like television has been really good these past, I think, 5-6 years as a result of being in competition with Netflix and what Netflix does. And they've been learning from Netflix, and they've been like, all these cable stations are doing broadcast, like Canadian broadcasting, American broadcasting. They're all competing and doing really good shows nowadays. So if you watch these great shows, you will see that you can tell stories throughout a season or a serialized story that have all these elements. Like they don't fool around when they do action. Like they do action with romance and comedy. Like they really tear it up together. So You just have to pay attention. You have to see what works. You have to understand the underlying concepts in these genres and just enjoy. And once you see, oh, this is why drama works, I understand. This is why comedy can be funny. Why I can't use the same metric when I'm comparing these scenes because comedy works differently than drama. Then you begin to understand things. If you were to go back and read, I don't know, Descartes, who's very teleological minded, or Jean-Jacques Rousseau, who's very child-minded, you know, all these great minds, you'll learn a lot about the concepts of appreciating forms of artistic expression. Like even Kant had a lot of great insight into visualizing things because everything was in his head, or that's how he thought ontologically. But that won't give you a great insight into the work itself, at the thing when you talk about art. So, nor is it a great rubric for you to apply to watching a movie nowadays. So that's why when you look at the things you really like, you say, why do I really like a space opera like Mass Effect? Why was it good? And then you actually find out there's a hell of a lot in those stories that aren't that good. And you realize, geez, you know what? This is not thought out. The things that made it good in the first game, at least, are there. All the groundwork is there, and they didn't actually build up on that. They didn't use it as a form of progressing the concepts or the ideas or the stories. They just took one idea, which was, you know, a premise for a plot line, and threw it around the room a few times. Oh, we can make a game out of that. It's like, no, don't do that. Write the story first, then write a game off the story. So modern versions of media for those stories are always going to be a lot different than what you think, because philosophers were thinking in terms of stage productions and one-man shows in Greek and all these other things. So they're not going to be as applicable. But you will find patterns that are interesting, like Freytag's pyramid, dramatic structure, relates to Aristotle's three-act plays or three-act structure. You'll see these patterns, which are good to pick up on, but you really should just get an appreciation for the written word. Short story is probably the best bet. Then you have novellas. You can go into epics. You can do novels. You can do the Foundation series. If you want to do science fiction, there's the Culture series by Ian M. Banks as well. There's all kinds of things you can research and look at and appreciate if you really want to. I mean, you spend so much time reading and watching movies and appreciating the art forms. But I think everyone knows, and I say this in general as a really bad thing to do, but everyone knows what sucks. Everyone can appreciate certain things. They sort of argue on what's good, but everyone knows what sucks. So when you watch Solo, when you watch Black Panther, and your brain starts going, wait a second, what did that actually do? What happened? Like these problems happen naturally. So what ends up going to be happening is you're either going to be one of those tvtropes.org guys who just have all these tropes in their head. Oh, they're using this technique. Oh, they don't know what they're doing. Or you're going to be a guy who goes, wait a second, okay, that is definitely a Deus Ex Machina. They really have to know what they're doing here. And when you look at Infinity War, the whole I don't know, but I'm imagining the whole movie is about this Deus Ex Machina guy who just snaps his fingers and does amazing things, and people suffering and struggling and failing against that ability. So to see the subversion of a trope is always beautiful. It's how it's done that gets you to pay attention. If it's done poorly, like we've seen in The Last Jedi, everyone who knows about writing and storytelling will say this is horrible. And even those who don't, but have the sensibility, which you sound like you do, is I know you have a good insight into things by analyzing things. You use the critical eye and many approaches to scenes.
Oh, thank you.
Oh, definitely. I mean, that's why your videos are so popular, because you have this insight that others don't. You will realize that, yeah, there's something wrong. I can't articulate that, but I'm going to talk to my buddy Jeff over here. Hey, Jeff, what do you think of that? And because he's your friend, he might have the same sensibility as you. He might have more vocabulary. He might have more experience, but there is a consensus that happens by virtue of talking about it that ends up happening. And that's what's interesting. When I talk to the fans of the movie, they can't hold a candle, or they can't defend their opinion outside of "it made me feel good." They try to then rationalize the feeling, like, "Oh, well, you see, this Luke was really doing this," and it's like, well, no, you kind of don't know what you mean. You're going along the spectacle and the emotional reaction, as opposed to analyzing what's actually there and figuring out why this scene works or doesn't. So, yeah, we need more people to explain these to writers, to be inspired to say, look, guys, there are right ways to write. Watch current TV, watch current movies and see what works, and read the classics. Read Harlan Ellison, read Asimov, read all these great guys who have come before us.
Certainly read the Iliad and the Odyssey.
Yes, for sure. We'll figure out why these stories of ancient Greece are still talked about today, and why we need to have plots that work and make sense and understandable, or else you're never going to advance the medium. You're never going to, you can't break rules unless you understand them. And all these fanboys don't even know what they're watching. They just see explosions and they see things, and they try to describe the shapes on the wall as the real reality, and it's just like, dude, you don't know what you're talking about. And that's a shame, because we can't talk to these people because they don't have the same vocabulary, or they don't have the same understanding that someone who's actually understood these things can talk about. Or if they're not, they're too biased in one direction, so you can't even have a conversation.
The cave can be very comfortable. I think on that front, we should really end the live stream here. I want to thank everyone for watching, and I hope you all have an excellent day, and I hope to be doing some more of these. Farewell.